My coworker asked me why I ignored him this morning. I was still asleep. Welcome back to Creepy Crochet and Creepy Pasta. Let's get into today's scaries. Listen, I'm not saying I'm being followed or anything like that, alright? I just want to clear that up front. It's just that weird little incidents have been happening to me recently. Stuff that's easy to brush off on its own, but together it's starting to get under my skin a little. I don't know. Maybe I'm just exhausted. I hope that's what it is. But I'm starting to feel like I don't live alone anymore. For one, when I'll go to lay down to go to sleep, I hear things, you know? Like outside my house or downstairs. Not that that's a big deal or anything, this house has always been like that. Like when I was a kid and I would stay over here with my grandpa, I'd stay up in bed listening to creaking boards or what I thought was some kind of monster scampering around outside. But there'd always be some explanation to it. Raccoons, the wind, late night bathroom trips. That's why I didn't think much of it at first. But the thing is, it feels like that stuff has been happening more often as of late. I mean, I must have lost like 15 hours of sleep in the last week because of this crap. It's not like I'm waiting at my bedroom door holding a bat or anything. I've just always had a hard time sleeping when it's noisy. It also feels like the noises have gotten more, I don't know, specific. The weird thing is it's not even loud most of the time. It's just enough noise for me to pick up on it. It'll be one sound every few minutes. A floorboard downstairs, something brushing against the side of the house. Once I could have sworn I heard one of the cabinet doors in the kitchen tap shut. And every single time I hear something, I end up holding my breath without realizing it. Just sitting there in bed listening as hard as I can. I've even started checking rooms before I go to sleep, which I know sounds ridiculous. Not because I think somebody's actually in the house or anything, I just feel compelled to do it. I can't even try to sleep before I've swept the whole house. The worst part is that once I'm finally awake enough to go get up and look around, everything always seems completely normal again. No open doors or missing things, nothing moved around, just that feeling that I interrupted something by getting out of bed. But last night, around maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, I heard what sounded like somebody taking one careful step downstairs. Just one. Then nothing for like 5 minutes. Then another one. Then another, and another, and another. It went on like this for what felt like hours. When I couldn't fall back asleep, I just started counting the sounds. 15 creaks. The first thing I did the next morning was count my stairs. 15 steps. My stairs have 15 steps. This freaked the hell out of me. I'd been trying to rationalize all those sounds for days, but this was a pretty big coincidence. Was there someone in my house? If so, why wasn't anything out of place? Nothing was stolen or moved or anything. And how could they have gotten inside? All the windows were normal, and I always triple-checked the locks on my doors, especially as of late. Eventually I told myself that what I heard couldn't have possibly been footsteps. Because why would someone go through all the trouble of breaking into my house just to tiptoe around? If they wanted to hurt me or rob me, they certainly could have. When I was done arguing with myself, I got ready and drove to work. The weather didn't do anything to calm my nerves. The sky was a washed out shade of gray and I could just tell it was about to rain. Anyways, I made it to my office and slumped down into my chair. Just as I was about to open my laptop and start working, I saw the shadow of my coworker looming over me. I turned around expecting to hear some small talk or a work question. My coworker, let's call him John Doe for the sake of privacy, always had this big toothy grin on his face. When I turned around to talk to him, he looked like a different person. Sweat was beginning to form on his brow and he was swaying back and forth nervously. Worst of all, he was frowning. In 3 years of working with John, I can count on my hands the number of times I've seen him frown. "What's wrong, John?" I asked, growing more worried by the second. He cleared his throat before he spoke. "Hey man, you alright?" "Yeah." "I don't know, I saw you this morning and you were acting kind of off." "What are you talking about?" "At the gas station on 35th. "What?" I blurted out, cutting him off. "I was driving past the gas station on 35th Street and I saw you there. You were just walking up and down the street. You know, I rolled down my window and tried to talk to you, but you just ignored me and kept pacing back and forth. You kept ignoring me, so I just gave up and drove away. I was just really weirded out, so when I saw you come in, I figured I'd ask you what the heck that was all about." "John, I wasn't at the gas station today. Hell, I didn't wake up until 7 this morning. You sure?" "Well, I could have sworn it was you." "Well, it wasn't. Gee, I suppose it was pretty dark out. Maybe I need to get my eyes checked." As he said this, his familiar smile creeped back onto his face. "Well, sorry to bother ya," he said as he began walking back to his cubicle. "John," I said. He looked back at me. "What was he wearing?" I asked. "What?" "The man you saw at the gas station. What was he wearing?" "Well, I didn't pay much attention to his outfit, you know." "Oh," he said, his face lighting up. "Now that you mention it, he was wearing an odd hat." "Odd how?" I asked. "Well, it was just a red baseball cap, but it had 1984 on it. Man, I remember reading that book way back in grade school. Not the kind of thing you expect to see on a hat." He turned around and sat down at his desk. I froze. A 1984 hat. My dad gave me a hat just like that when I was in high school. I've never seen another one like it. I basically sleptwalked through the rest of the day. My head was swimming with questions. When I finally got home, I went through my entire house. Everything was in its place, except for one thing, my hat. I always hang my 1984 hat on the second coat hook from my back door. Always. But when I checked that room, the hat was hanging slightly out of place. It was on the hook closest to the door. I checked the inside band. There was a receipt folded into it from the gas station on 35th Street. Time, 4:12 a.m. Something in my apartment started tapping on the walls, and it could copy me. Welcome back to Creepy Crochet and Creepy Pasta. Let's get into today's scary story. It's been years, but when I was 25, I got my first apartment alone. Everything seemed normal the first few weeks. Besides an eerie feeling in the bedroom, I just loved it. But I couldn't bring myself to sleep in the bedroom. I slept on my couch. Maybe a month in, I'd hear cabinets opening in the kitchen, and it sounded like someone was trying to get dishes or silverware, but quietly, like they weren't trying to wake me. I'd get up to check but found nothing out of place. I even had the landlord check for rodents. No evidence of any infestation though, so I just started sleeping with the TV on so the bumps in the night didn't bother me as much. A couple of weeks passed and I found myself being woken up every night between 2 to 4 a.m. to incredibly loud banging coming from the laundry room. It went on for hours, the entire summer. It sounded like 2 raccoons fighting inside the dryer. My friend spent the night and bravely went to check out the noise. As soon as he opened the door to the laundry room, the banging stopped. Neither machine was on. In fact, the rule was no laundry could be started after 8:30 p.m. Yes, before anyone asks, there was a working carbon monoxide detector in my apartment. I thought I was going crazy, until friends who'd stayed the night experienced weird things too. One said she'd never even come over again. The scariest part though was the tapping, which only happened in the bedroom. I'd started having my boyfriend spend the night so I could sleep in my bed without the TV on. That's when I could finally prove to him that something was going on inside the walls. The tapping would start on one side of the room and gradually move to the other wall, over my bed, then inside the closet and work its way back. This occurred each night between 2 to 4 a.m. It wasn't the pipes or an animal. Whatever it was, this was trying to get my attention. One night we decided to tap back. It mimicked the beat. Every unique beat we came up with, the thing that kept me up at night would repeat it back. Despite all of this, I really didn't want to move. After 5 years there, my landlord passed away. The building went into foreclosure and the new owner gave me 30 days notice to move out. Other things happened there, but these repeated events scared me the most. That's horrifying. This scary story comes from Reddit, but if you want to send me your personal scary story, you can email it to lidslunacy@gmail.com. You can also subscribe here on TikTok for a little bit of extra content. Crochet patterns and plushies are always available on my Etsy, link in bio. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Creepy Crochet and Creepy Pasta. See you in the next video. Bye. My ex-girlfriend called asking for help. She wanted a ride home, but whatever I let in my car was not human anymore. Welcome back to Creepy Crochet and Creepy Pasta. Let's get into today's scary story. Something strange happened that night when I was driving home. It was the same drive I took every night. I was working late and finally ready to leave. While I was driving out of the parking lot, I got a call. It was from my ex-girlfriend Jessica. It was strange because she hadn't contacted me in almost a year. I was glad I got the call before I made it too far down the road where I lost service. I pulled over and answered the call. Before I could even say hello, she cut me off, sounding genuinely scared. Please, you need to help. I can't reach anyone else. I need you to pick me up at the Cypress Street bus station as soon as you can get here. I tried to respond, but the line went dead. I called her back asking what was going on, but she didn't pick up. I was surprised she would be calling me if she needed help and confused why, if it was urgent or if she was in danger, that she wouldn't call 911. I couldn't risk ignoring it though. If she really needed help, I had to do something. I turned around and took a detour to Cypress Street to try and find her. I got there in good time and started searching for any bus stops until I found one. Sure enough, there she was. Jessica was sitting alone at the bus stop. She was wearing a large coat but seemingly shivering out in the night. She was still seated and didn't appear to be in immediate danger. I pulled up to the curb by the bus stop and called out, "Jess?" At first she didn't answer, and I was embarrassed I might have made a mistake, but then suddenly she turns towards me and had a strange, confused look like she was just remembering something. She stood up and slowly walked over to my car. I was relieved it was her, and I called out again. "What's wrong, Jess? Did you need a lift? I don't know if the red line comes through this late on a Thursday. Are you alright? You sounded really nervous earlier and wouldn't pick up when I called you back." She still looked confused, and I was worried something was wrong, but she suddenly smiled as if remembering something that made her happy, and she regarded me. "Oh, thank you. I'm not sure how I got here. Please, take me home." Without another word, she shuffled over to the passenger side and let herself in. The way she moved seemed irregular, not quite like she was drunk, but just an odd, pained movement, like she might be hurt. Yet her expression showed no signs of discomfort at all. The effect was a little jarring, and after she got in my car, I suddenly felt a bit unnerved. I brushed it off though. After all, we had dated for 3 years and we knew each other pretty well. I figured maybe she was just having a bad night, or perhaps even a bit drunk, though I didn't smell anything on her. I tried to act casual and smiled. She returned the gesture in a strange half-smile, half-grimace. "So, where to?" I asked again. She just sat there, still smiling faintly and looking at me, or rather, staring. She continued for nearly 30 seconds, and it felt like she was staring a hole into me. I cleared my throat and asked again. Jessica, where'd you need to go? What did you call me for?" "Oh, I called you." She paused, looking confused, then continued. "Home. Take me home with you. I need help." She looked like she was ready to cry, and my sympathy in the moment prevented me from considering how oddly she was acting and the strange way she was speaking. I decided I would start heading home, and along the way, try to see what was really going on. We drove on for a while, and she didn't offer any details. She didn't talk about anything unless I asked her directly. She just alternated between staring outside, or worse, when she thought I wasn't looking at her, she would stare at me. The way she looked at me made me uncomfortable. We'd spent so much time together, but whatever was wrong with her now made her look at me as if I were an alien she was studying. "What actually happened tonight, Jess? What's wrong? This is kind of strange, you calling me after all this time." I asked her honestly. She looked at me again, her head tilted like a bird examining prey. She replied, I was attacked. Caught. Someone caught me. Hurt me. I will get help tomorrow, but tonight I just needed a face. A familiar face. I nodded my head and focused on the road. I missed my turn. I had a bad feeling about taking her home in this state. Something was off. As we drove on, she seemed to settle in, and her head lolled back, almost like she was nodding off to sleep. I considered that she might have suffered a head injury or something, which would help explain the odd behavior. I thought it might be good to take her to a hospital just to have her checked out. She started making odd noises while I thought she was asleep. Strange hissing sounds, which had to be intentional. I never heard someone snore like that before. I decided to turn around and start heading back into town. Either I could take her to the hospital or back to her own home. She stayed in the strange sleeping trance for a while. A few times I was worried because I couldn't hear her breathing anymore, but she suddenly exhaled and made more of those strange sounds. When I got back into town and my reception returned, I received a text, or rather a handful of them. I glanced at my phone quickly without wanting to take my eyes off the road for too long. I was confused when I saw they were from Jessica. I thought for a moment she might be pulling some prank where she pretends to be asleep and then messages me. I was curious how she could do that while looking like she was unconscious. I slowed down a little bit and confirmed the empty road, and then pulled up the messages just to see. What I read made my blood freeze. The first one came shortly after I picked Jessica up. "Where are you? Please, I need help. I can't say much, and you will think I'm crazy, but I can't go to the police. I just need to get out of here before it comes back. Something is after me. It looked like a cop earlier. I saw it again, and I had to hide. It tried to kill me. After it attacked me, it changed. You have to believe me. It looks like me." The message ended, and I read the next one. "I'm sorry, I don't know where it went. I don't see you here. Please hurry." I read the final message, just sent a few minutes ago. "I need to leave. I hope you're okay. I'm sorry, I never should have asked you to come and get me tonight. I was just so scared. It's better if you stay away. It's not safe. Forget I called you. Don't come here, and if you see me waiting, turn away. I know it sounds insane, but it's not really me." I glanced over to the woman sleeping next to me. Her head was slumped forward, but her eyes were fluttering under her lids like REM sleep. I had no idea what was happening. If I wanted to believe Jess, then I had to accept that the person sitting next to me was not only not really her, but was a violent monster. Whatever was happening, I had to get her out of my car. I had an idea. I stopped at a gas station, and she woke up as I was parking. She turned over, cracked her neck in an awkward stretch that sounded horrifically painful, but seemed not to cause her discomfort, and asked, "Are we home? I'm so hungry." I held my nerve and lied. "Yes, we are. I can get you something inside. Come on, let's go in and I can get you a bite to eat." She scrutinized me, and for a second I thought she could see through the ruse, but her head cocked and she gave an unsettling smile. She slowly opened the car door and stepped out. She waited for me to get out, but I lunged across the seat and pulled the door closed and locked it. The fake smile faded, and my fear that this was just some trick had fully dissolved. What I saw next was something I can never unsee. As she raged outside, her face twisted into a nightmarish jumble of different human features, and an unholy noise emerged that sounded like 100 people screaming at once. She pulled so hard on the door that the handle broke off and part of it buckled. I was not sure that she wouldn't be able to rip the entire door off if she tried hard enough. I put the car in reverse and slammed on the gas, peeling out of there. I managed to turn around and drive away. I looked in my rearview mirror and, to my horror, the thing that had once looked like Jessica was right behind me, sprinting at nearly the speed of the car. The thing chased me for several blocks, moving so fast I was afraid she might actually catch up. I finally lost her, and I struggled to calm myself so I wouldn't crash. I was terrified, but I had so many questions. I called Jessica again, but she didn't answer. I was afraid something had happened to her. I even drove back to the bus stop, but as she had said in her message, she was gone. I didn't know what to do, so I finally drove home after going in a few circles around town and checking behind me at several intervals to make sure I wasn't followed. I kept trying to reach out to Jessica, but after several days her voicemail was full, and after a week I found out she had gone missing. I had a horrible feeling that whatever that thing was had caught up to her. I was devastated that she was gone, but also terrified that whatever it was knew who I was now too. I ended up moving away. I couldn't bear the idea of living near where such a thing existed. I couldn't find any information on what it was or how Jessica had found it, but all I knew was it was real, and it was still out there. After enough time had passed, I felt a bit safer. I thought that since I had put enough distance between us, things would be alright. That all changed after the call I received last night. I got a message from a familiar number. It was my old coworker, Jeff. I asked him why he was calling and he started laughing. "What do you mean? You said you'd come over for the party. I saw you last night. You seemed a little drunk, but I figured you'd remember agreeing to come over and say hi to everyone again. It's been so long. I just wanted to remind you to BYOB. See you there." He said goodbye, and I held the phone next to my ear in shock. The call had ended, and I was speechless. I sit here now, terrified of what is happening back home. There's only one way they could have seen me there. That thing was back. It's there. It's hunting. I have to call and tell everyone. They have to believe me. They have to know that if they see me, it's not really me, and it's not safe. Stories about mimics don't always scare me, but these two seriously got under my skin. Welcome back to Creepy Crochet and Creepy Pasta. Let's get into these scary stories. We stayed in this extremely old creepy cabin in Montana. It was in the middle of nowhere, and it was so old that it didn't even have a bathroom, just an outhouse. There was a rope that went from the cabin to the outhouse so you could navigate back and forth at night because it was pitch black. So one night my mom's dead asleep when she wakes up out of the blue feeling really afraid. She opens her eyes to see my stepdad just staring at her with freakishly wide eyes, a scary grin, and she said he just looked horrifying. He said, "How are you feeling?" This makes sense because the first day we got there, she got really sick and stayed that way the entire trip. It sucked because there were no hospitals anywhere nearby. As soon as he muttered this, she heard footsteps approaching. She looked to see who was coming up the stairs. It was none other than my stepdad. He had gone to use the outhouse and was confused when she told him what had happened. She turned back to see who was in bed with her, but nobody was there. It scared the shit out of her and we left the next morning. She also felt better within hours of getting on the road. Ugh, guys, that image in my head. It's dark outside and I'm home alone. Let's move on to the second story. So when I was 4 years old, I was sharing a bed with my bigger brother, and my mom and dad slept in a different room while my sister had a room to herself. One night I woke up in the middle of the night, and in between the wall and the bed there was a small gap where no one should be able to fit through unless you push the bed out a little more. I turned my head and saw my dad. My dad especially was a big man. I asked him what he was doing there. At this point I'm confused. There is no response. "Dad? Dad," I yelled. I tugged at my brother to wake him up to get his attention, but he wouldn't budge. He's not a deep sleeper. Me and my dad went into a staring contest for a brief minute with our eyes locking. As the minute passed, he reached out his arms and starts choking me. I cried out, "What is he doing? Dad! Dad!" I yelled. I couldn't breathe. Then he just lets go. I ran out of the room and into my parents' room, and strangely enough, my dad was in the bed with my mom sleeping soundly. Strange. I went back to my room, and what took the appearance of my dad was no longer there in that gap. I went to my bed and slept with the covers over my head from there on. I have goosebumps all up and down my arms. Just picture you're laying in bed, there's a gap between your bed and the wall, and you look and there's just like two glowing eyeballs looking up at you, and it's someone that looks like your family member, but something's just not quite right. Yeah, it's gonna be a no from me. Here's this adorable Billy the Bat I made. Guys, I am still upset about these stories. I've been looking over my shoulder. Comment your mimic stories down below. Follow for more videos, and I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye. What if the thing sitting on your couch looked like your daughter and sounded like your daughter, but was not your daughter? Welcome back to Creepy Crochet and Creepy Pasta. Let's get into today's scary story. Me, 36 female, and my daughter Olivia, 16 female, live in a small town in South Dakota. She goes with her father every weekend. She leaves every Friday afternoon and comes back Sunday evening, so usually she'll be gone by the time I get home from work on Friday evenings. This particular Friday, when I pulled up to our driveway, I looked up at her window and noticed her bedroom light was still on. I figured she accidentally left it on before leaving, I don't know. I walk into the house and hear movement coming from upstairs. "Oh, she's still home," I whispered to myself. I went upstairs and knocked on her bedroom door and slowly opened it. "Your dad isn't picking you up this weekend?" I asked. "No, I told him I want to stay," she said while looking down at her journal. "Great, I'll make dinner for us and we can watch a movie if you'd like." There was a long pause before she said, "Yes." I closed her door and I thought she was acting a bit standoffish. She usually has a lot to say. I texted her dad asking if they maybe got into some sort of disagreement or argument that led to her not wanting to go with him this weekend. I went downstairs and started making dinner for us. As the food was cooking, I started organizing things around the house, and I noticed Olivia's book bag and coat aren't hung up where we usually hang our things when we get home. I thought maybe she just took her things up to her room. No biggie. I went into the living room and saw Olivia sitting on the couch facing away from me. I didn't even hear her coming down the stairs. She kind of startled me, especially because she's just sitting there, not on her phone like usual, and the TV was off. I walk over to the kitchen and check on the food. I yell out if she can please pick out a movie for us. I went out to check what movie she picked, and to my surprise, the TV is still off and she's still sitting there motionless. "Olivia, you didn't hear me?" I said. I grabbed the remote and picked out a movie. I chose The Conjuring. I love Vera Farmiga. I grabbed our plates, and as I sat down on the couch, I heard a notification coming from my phone in the kitchen. I told her I'll be right back. I checked my phone, and it was a text from her father. After reading his message, my body went cold and stiff. Literal chills. He said, "What do you mean? I picked up Olivia from school and we're grabbing dinner with her grandma right now." I feel catatonic at this point. I took a deep breath and walked slowly towards the living room, peeking in to see if it was still sitting on the couch. It was. It was just sitting there, very still, looking forward but away from me. I haven't even seen Olivia's face since I've been home. Like the thing has purposely been avoiding eye contact. I went back into the kitchen. I didn't know what to do. I'm fucking terrified. I had to go back out there. My car keys are in the living room. I took a deep breath and got the courage to walk out confidently like everything was normal. It was gone. I don't know why I yelled out, "Olivia?" My stupid, confused human instincts. I heard its voice coming from upstairs, sounding just like my Olivia. It said, "Mom, I'm upstairs. I need your help," in the most sinister voice. Hell no. I grabbed my keys and ran the fuck out of the house. I was shaking so much I couldn't even put the damn keys in the ignition. God, I wish I had a push start for this very moment. As I reversed out of my driveway, I looked up at the house and it was in Olivia's window waving at me, faceless. I couldn't breathe. I never drove off so fast in my life. That one freaked me out. If you want to send me your scary story, feel free to email it to me at lidslunacy@gmail.com. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Creepy Crochet and Creepy Pasta, and I will be seeing you in the next video. Bye! My husband started leaving the room every time I walked in. Last night, I found out why. Welcome back to Creepy Crochet and Creepy Pasta. Let's get into part 2 of this scary story. Update. It's been 3 days since I posted. I want to start by saying I'm okay, I think. I'm staying at my sister's right now, which is why I finally have the headspace to write this. Here's what happened when I opened the door. Marcus was sitting at the kitchen table, coffee in front of him, both hands wrapped around the mug, fully dressed, like he'd been waiting for me. He looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Something in his face had changed overnight. Some tension I hadn't even noticed building had finally broken, and what was left looked very, very old. "Sit down," he said. Not a request exactly, not an order, just tired. I sat. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything. Can you do that?" I said yes. He started talking. He told me it had been following him since January. He didn't know what it was. He still doesn't. He said it had started small, peripheral, a shape in a dark doorway, a reflection that lingered a half second too long, the feeling of being watched from somewhere that couldn't have anything in it. He thought he was losing his mind. Then he realized it wasn't interested in him. "It was watching you," he said. "It was always watching you. I was in the way." He said that was when he started leaving rooms when I entered them, not to avoid me, to see if it would follow, to test whether he could get between it and me without either of us knowing it was happening. He said that most of the time at work, he said it seemed confused by him, like it didn't understand why he kept intercepting it, like it had never encountered that before. "What is it?" I asked. He shook his head. "I don't know, but it knows you. It knows your name." "How do you know that?" He looked at the table. "'Cause at night it practices." I didn't say anything. "That's why I was in the hallway," he said. "If I stood between it and the bedroom door, it would slow down. It would wait. I don't know why, but it would wait." He looked up at me then, and his eyes were red. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to be afraid. I thought I could manage it. I thought if I just kept getting in the way." He stopped. "Marcus," I said, "last night, what was it doing?" He was quiet for a long time. "I think it was getting impatient," he said. "I went to my sister's that afternoon. Marcus is still at the house. He won't leave. He says if he leaves with me, it leaves with me, and he thinks that's worse. He says it's used to him now. He says he has a system. He calls me every morning at 7 a.m. on the dot. He called this morning. He didn't say much, asked if I slept okay, asked about the weather where my sister lives. Before he hung up, he said, 'I love you. Don't come back yet.' Then he said quieter, 'It's still learning your voice.'" I asked him what that meant. He said he had to go. He'll call tomorrow. He always calls. I'm not going back yet. Guys, this Reddit story has me wanting to check under every single piece of furniture in my house. Welcome back to Creepy Crochet and Creepypasta, a series where I crochet something creepy and talk about something even creepier. For today, we're going to hold the crochet. Thank you very much. Listen to this. This is from the Ask Reddit thread. What are some unexplainable events or phenomena that you've observed personally which made you go, what the F? I woke up from a nightmare and turned around to see my partner snuggling me. Her ear was twitching a little bit, but she looked peaceful, so I didn't want to wake her up. I rolled over onto my back and stared at the ceiling, trying to fall back asleep. To my horror, the bedroom door opened and my partner walked in. I just stared at her in the dark for several seconds and then said, "What the fuck?" She turned around, saw my eyes wide in panic, and asked if I was okay. I looked frantically next to me where I had literally just seen her, and then back to where she was standing. She kept asking if I was okay, and I said, "I just saw you next to me." She told me that was impossible because she had been in the bathroom for the last 30 minutes. I kept insisting that she had been sleeping right next to me, but gave it up and turned over to try to sleep again. She got in bed and fell asleep within a few minutes. As my eyes started to close, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up and I became aware of a weird weight on the side of the bed, almost as if someone had just stepped on the mattress. I knew I wasn't imagining it because my foot was starting to slide down the incline that the weight was creating. My mind was racing and I couldn't bring myself to look. I felt the bed compress back to normal and could hear shuffling across the carpet. When we both woke up, she asked me what I saw lying next to me. I told her I saw you. Same hairstyle, same freckles, same lips. She finally confessed that when I'm at work, that the same incident happens to her when she's laying down. It creeps me the f*** out. Okay, has this ever happened to any of you? Because this has happened to me. When I was a young child, maybe around 7 or 8 years old, and my great aunt had passed away recently. I was laying in bed and I have a brother. My mom would always go check on my brother and then check on me. She would sing to us, help us fall asleep. So one night I'm laying in bed like half asleep and I think that she comes in to check on me because I feel like this guy described, like a weight at the foot of my bed as if someone had sat down. And I stretched my leg to, go to poke who I thought was my mom with my foot, and there was nothing there but like a divot of like someone's butt, and it was freezing cold. Anyway, that's what this reminded me of. That's so creepy. Okay, let's read another one because now I'm spooked. One time when I was around the age of 10, my grandparents let me stay home alone while they took my siblings to watch a hockey game. I distinctly remember that I was home alone because it was the first time I was ever left alone and I felt so cool for having the autonomy. Neighbor girl I hung out with, who was probably around the age of 8, was the only person there with me, so I wasn't completely alone, but we were only aware of the presence of both of us. We lived in a very small town where crime was practically non-existent. It was tranquil. A mass majority of people would leave their front doors unlocked at nighttime because nothing suspicious ever really happened. Anyways, we were sitting in my grandma's living room about an hour after them being gone when all of a sudden we heard someone. It was as if there was another person in the room, perhaps hiding behind something, that said meow. Not imitating the sound, not trying to make it sound like a cat, literally just saying meow. Now me and the neighbor girl were mid-conversation when this happened. I know it wasn't her playing a trick on me because I was literally looking at her mouth move as it happened. There was no TV on, doors were locked, our faces both went white. Never in my life had I been more scared. We scoured the house to look for something, anything that would explain this. We looked in the living room and tore it apart to figure it out as it sounded like it was in the room with us. It wasn't even a faint noise. It was as plain and clear as day. It wasn't a toy. I am positive it was a person. To this day, there's still no explanation. Under that story, someone commented, "Something similar happened to my husband and me. I had just had our daughter, I think she was maybe a month old. I still had her in our room in a bassinet. I was just drifting off to sleep when I heard a deep male voice say something. It was loud enough to wake the baby, but I didn't know or couldn't comprehend what it had said. Even our 2 dogs were growling. I was so sleep deprived I rationalized it as a dream or my husband talking in his sleep. As I lay there praying that my daughter would go back to sleep, my husband said, 'Did you hear that voice?' I shot out of bed, lights on, grabbed the baby, absolutely freaking out. My husband had thought he maybe dreamt it, but he asked me just to be sure since the dogs were acting strange. He checked the whole house and no one was there. We were adults and we were terrified. I can't imagine how scared you and your friend must have been." Guys, what? Okay, let's read one more short one. When I was in high school, my girlfriend at the time and I were watching a movie in the living room. We're the only 2 there as my folks were out of town. Another Home Alone story, that's good. My neighbor texted me that he wanted to come over and watch the movie with us, so I said, "Sure, come on by." I got up, unlocked the door so he could let himself in, and I sat back down on the couch. A few minutes later, he shows up and watches the movie with us for maybe half an hour or so before leaving to head back home. As he left, I locked the door again and turned off the kitchen light, had to walk through the kitchen to get to the back door. When the movie was just about over, I noticed the kitchen light was back on, so I asked my girlfriend if she had turned it on. She replied no, so I shrugged and got back up to turn it back off. Our back door is wide open. I remember feeling chills going down my spine as I distinctly remember both locking the door and turning off the light on my way back to the couch. Yeah, no, we're done for today. Follow for more. Thank you very much. Guys, I just want to start editing the video and my iPad overheard me say series in the video and then Siri responded on my iPad. She said, I almost did it myself. My brother left to hike the Appalachian Mountains. What came back is not him. Welcome back to Creepy Crochet and Creepy Pasta. Let's get into today's scary story. My brother, Kevin, not his real name, I'm trying to keep some anonymity, has always been outdoorsy. Growing up, he would wander off into the woods behind my parents' property and stay out there for hours. He said that being out in nature brought him a lot of peace. A few months ago, things kind of spiraled for him. He lost his girlfriend, his job, and his apartment within 6 weeks. He ended up moving back home with me and my parents to try and get back on his feet. It was hard to see him like that. I mean, he was never someone I would describe as an eternal optimist, but that little spark he always had was gone. This past spring, I found him sitting at the kitchen table in the middle of the night. He was picking apart a piece of cold pizza, and it was the first time I had seen him almost eat something in days. I told him maybe he should get back out into nature, take some hikes, or maybe do a solo camping weekend. I said that I had noticed he had seemed down lately and maybe being out in the world could help him get back to himself. In the moment, I wasn't sure if he was really hearing me, but he took a bite of pizza, squeezed my hand, said he loved me, and went back to his bedroom. The next morning, he announced to my parents that he was going to hike the Appalachian Trail. My mom was hesitant, but Kevin told her that he knew enough about himself to know that sitting at home in his room was causing more stress than if he could go out and just be in the place that made him feel most at ease. My dad just said that as long as Kev checked in every few days or so, he didn't see a problem with it. My dad pointed out that it wasn't like Kevin didn't have the experience. He was a Boy Scout turned Eagle Scout turned camping enthusiast. People do that hike all the time, Kathleen. If it were dangerous, no one would be bragging about it. I remember him saying those words exactly. I don't know why they stuck in my head the way they did, but maybe it was the way Kevin seemed to brighten up a little bit after my dad gave him his blessing in a sort of roundabout way. The next 2 weeks were spent helping my brother pack what he would need, registering his hike, and buying a plane ticket to Georgia where he would start his trip. The night he left, our mom was a mess. She kept fussing over him as if he wasn't a full-grown man. She kept asking if he had everything he needed, and he just kept assuring her he did and would check in with us once he got to the trailhead. Looking back now, he seemed genuinely excited. If I had known what would happen, I would never let him leave. My brother called like he said he would, just as he was beginning his trip. He even sent a photo in our family group chat that showed him up against a backdrop of purple blue mountains and lush greenery. He had a thumbs up and his signature slightly off-center smirk. He wrote, "Finally made it. Love you guys. Talk when I get better reception." Over the next few days, Kevin would send a photo or video, usually of his surroundings, but occasionally he would send a selfie with the caption, "Proof of life." But as the days wore on, we stopped getting updates as frequently. What was a text at least once a day became a text once every 3 or 4 days. My dad blamed it on spotty cell reception, which made sense, and it wasn't as if the messages stopped altogether, and from what I could piece together from his photos and short text bursts, he was making good time. It was around a month and a half into his trip when we realized it had been almost 2 weeks without any communication from Kevin. We called the authorities, we gave them all the information that we had, but based on what we knew, it was hard to say he was even missing. As far as the police were concerned, he had gone off-grid with the intent of going off-grid. Sending out search and rescue would cost thousands of dollars, and it could be a waste of resources, especially if there was someone else who needed it. They said they would put a notice out to the Ridge Runners, and if they saw Kevin, they were told to tell him to contact us. My mom was furious, but I couldn't necessarily blame the cops for their response. We had no evidence to support that Kevin was anything but content out in the wilderness. A few days later, a text came through, just a photo of sunset and the words, "Everything is okay here." That began the new normal of conversation with my brother. There would be long stretches of time where we would hear nothing, just long enough for my mother to start panicking, and then we would get a blurry photo and a generic caption. "Look what I saw today," or "Wish you were here." One night, while going through the photos he had sent, I realized in the background of every shot from before we had called the police was a black smudge. It was too blurry to properly make it out, and it didn't seem to be an animal or something caught moving in the camera lens. But after the first photo he had sent after we thought he was missing, the smudge was gone. Kevin came home earlier than expected. He also hadn't told anyone his plans. One night during dinner, there was a loud, sharp knock at the door. My dad got up to answer it, and there was Kevin. His hair was long and stringy, he had grown a patchy beard over his cheek and jaws. His lips were dry and cracked, and his gums were coated in a dried layer of blood. He was rail thin. He had lost at least 30 pounds, and he wasn't a large man to begin with. His clothes were filthy, caked in mud and debris, and his shoes looked like they had been worn thin at the sole. My mother made a sound almost like a yelp and rushed over to him. The smell coming off him made me gag. It smelled like he'd smeared rotting meat under his armpits. My dad just looked at him in shock. When he finally spoke, his voice was dry and raspy, as if he hadn't used it in weeks. "Mom," was all he could say before he practically collapsed in her arms. I won't bore you guys with everything that happened after that. There was a lot of hugging, some tears, and then a very, very long shower. But something didn't feel right. Kev went to bed pretty much immediately after. He barely even looked at us. The next morning, he ate breakfast with a ferocity that made my skin crawl. He was gulping down huge mouthfuls of food, barely stopping to breathe. My mom just kept piling his plate with bacon, eggs, and toast. He stopped only after he had consumed a whole loaf of bread, 2 packages of bacon, and nearly 2 dozen eggs. I tried to ask him about the trip, tried to get him to say anything at all really, but all I got were grunts and uh-huhs before he lumbered back off to his bedroom. The next few days were more of the same. Kev eating an insane amount of food, sleeping for hours, and then mumbling his way through conversations. It took about a week for him to start communicating like a human being again, but even then it was stilted, awkward, and unnatural. He's been home for almost a month now and something isn't right. His voice, it's changed somehow. It's still his voice, but it's like there's a second voice buried underneath it. Like someone's trying to harmonize while he speaks. He lumbers around the house like his knees are locked in place, but he refuses to go to the doctors. The worst part is the smell. It still won't go away. No matter how often or how long he showers, he still reeks like death. I could have maybe ignored all this, maybe blame it on being isolated in the woods for weeks, but after what happened tonight, I couldn't sleep. That feeling of fear in my stomach I felt ever since he's been back hasn't gone away, and honestly it keeps me up most nights. I was trying to will myself to sleep when I heard the back door creak open. I crept out of my bedroom and down the hall. From my viewpoint I could see into the kitchen through the window into the backyard. I saw my brother, perched on his hands and knees. He was twitching wildly, like every muscle in his neck and head were spasming. He whined his stance and thrashed his head towards the ground and out of my line of sight. Trigger warning? I was worried that maybe he was having some kind of seizure, so I ran out to check on him, and that's when I saw it. His head was buried deep into the carcass of one of our neighbor's cats. He was chomping down on its tiny body, blood oozing out between the gaps in his teeth. The thing had clearly been dead for a day or so. I ran back into the house and locked the door behind me. I was about to run back to my bedroom when that smell hit me, that horrible death stench that had been wafting around my brother. I opened the door to his room and inched a few feet inside. Wrapped in his bedding were the decaying bodies of 20 or so animals. rabbits, mice, squirrels. I tried to run to my parents' room to wake them up, to tell them we needed to call someone. As I turned around, I saw Kevin in the kitchen window, his body drenched in blood. He was eyeing me through the glass, his head tilted at an angle that shouldn't be possible. The vertebrae in his neck strained underneath his skin. He lunged at the window and I screamed. My parents woke up then. They found me in the hallway, sobbing, sweating, shaking with fear. I told them what I saw and my dad rushed outside to try and, well, I don't know exactly what he was trying to do, but it didn't matter. My brother was gone. We called the police and they said it sounded like my brother had had some sort of mental crisis. Maybe he had picked up some kind of parasite in the woods that was impacting his brain chemistry. I know they're wrong though. Whatever that thing is, it is not my brother. My brother left for the Appalachian Trail and never came back. I think whatever that black smudge was in those photos was something that hunted him, and I think it was successful. Whatever that thing was killed my brother and somehow his body came back home. My brother disappeared that night, but I'm terrified he will come back.
Let's read another scary Reddit story. Right now, I'm just obsessed with scary stories that take place like camping in the woods, probably because it's winter, like it's getting cold outside. So here's another spooky woods camping story. I had a very scary experience happen to me in 2017 that has stuck with me throughout the years, and I'm wondering if you all could possibly help me explain what I witnessed in the woods all those years ago. I was about 16 at the time, and I'm half Indigenous. I was visiting my uncle on my mom's side, the Indigenous side, at my uncle's cabin located in the woods of northwestern Maine because I was driving my grandpa up to visit them for the fall season. The cabin was rather small and could only accommodate my uncle, aunt, and grandpa, so I was told to sleep in the camper that was set back further into the woods. That evening went by as usual. Auntie made dinner and we all laughed and shared stories and eventually turned in for the night. I took a flashlight and started my way out to the camper. About halfway down, I shut off the flashlight and looked up to admire the night sky. It was at this point I noticed how quiet the forest had become. There were no birds or sounds of crickets or rustling leaves, just pure silence. I suddenly got this intense feeling of dread deep within my gut, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. The voice in my head told me to bolt to the camper as fast as I could. For some reason, my instincts told me I didn't belong there and something was watching me. When I made it to the camper, I slammed the door shut and double locked it, closing the window blinds. I swear I could hear my heart pounding in my ears as I laughed at myself for getting so worked up over nothing. The entire night, I was restless in my sleep. I couldn't help but hear footsteps and movement all around the camper. I told myself it was just curious animals and grazing deer, but my dreams were haunted by something I couldn't see. Unfortunately, this would not be my final experience of the weekend. By morning, all seemed normal. I thought about mentioning what had happened to my grandfather over breakfast, but I was worried that he would brush me off as being overdramatic or being too used to the city life. I let the odd night slide off my mind as I enjoyed the day with my family and their big shepherd, Frank. Just to calm my nerves, I asked for Frank to accompany me in the camper that evening to ensure I felt safe. The walk back was once again fine until I began to enter the tree line. I'm not sure if it was because I was feeling nervous as well, but Frank seemed to be on the edge with his ears perked and his head on a swivel. That night he slept in the bed of the trailer with me. I felt safer with the dog there. However, I had an extremely awful dream in which when I awoke, Frank was staring at the wall of the trailer with his hackles standing on end. When the morning hit, I packed my bags to leave in the afternoon and brought Frank out of the trailer and led him to the small field between the cabin and the thick woods. I was kicking his ball for him to excitedly chase, grab, and return to me. We continued this game until I kicked the ball a bit too hard and it rolled down to the edge of the woods. Frank raced down to grab the ball until his full sprint turned into a full stop, digging his paws into the dirt meters past where the ball had landed. He was standing stiff, fur on end, ears pinned back and unmoving. I called for him to come, which he always responded to, but he didn't even acknowledge me. I began to walk down to where he was, calling his name a little bit louder, still with no response. I grabbed him by the collar, getting kind of worried at this point as his eyes stared directly into the trees. I yelled his name loudly, giving him a little tug. The forest was silent. Moments later, the silence was broken by an echo of my voice yelling back. However, this echo was delayed and distorted. It sounded like me, but also not like me. I froze and looked into the dark woods, holding my breath, only for another scream to come from the woods in my voice. I immediately turned and booked it back to the cabin. I came to my auntie crying and trying to tell her that there was something out there in those woods. She comforted me and told me it must have been nothing, but she seemed as if that was not the answer she wanted to give. My family is rather superstitious, especially me, and I'm guessing she didn't want me to overthink anything. I left that afternoon and I have not been back since that weekend. Yeah, I wouldn't go back there either. No.
Let's read another scary story. This happened in July 2019 before the COVID pandemic started. Two of my friends and I really wanted to travel to the north of Portugal. We live in the capital of the country, Lisbon, and in the north there is a place called Garage, a natural park where people can camp. Instead of tents, we rented small bungalows because we don't really like sleeping in tents. Everything was going well. One of my friends, Sophia, is a very good driver and very down to earth when it comes to supernatural things. My other friend, Carla, loves this type of thing. She even dresses a bit like a witch and is fascinated by anything supernatural. We arrived in Garage by car and everything was beautiful. The smell of the forest in the morning with the mist still slowly disappearing was amazing. We went to the reception to get the key to our bungalow and walked to it. It was about a 10-minute walk from reception. There were 3 bungalows in that area. In one of them, there were people around our age, maybe about 25. They looked like a couple, and they also had a dog, a Portuguese water dog, which in the US is known as the dog that the Obamas had. In the other bungalow, there was an older couple, around 65 years old. They looked like a very sweet pair. We went to the supermarket to buy food, and when we came back, the area was full of sounds from birds and animals. It was beautiful. Night started to fall, but we felt safe because there were cameras outside the bungalows. My friend Sophia went to sleep because she was tired from the long drive. Carl and I stayed watching TV, and later we decided to go outside in front of the bungalow just to breathe the incredibly pure air. We did this for several days. We walked through the forest and enjoyed nature. On the 4th day, we did the same thing, but this time the 3 of us went outside together. It was around 10 p.m. when we suddenly heard a scream. It was the girl from the bungalow next door shouting to her boyfriend not to go because it might just be an animal. When he opened the door, he looked at us and said, "Can you hear that scream too?" We said yes. He said he would go to reception in case someone needed help. My friend Carla, who loves night walks and mysterious things, said she would go with him. So the rest of us stayed near our bungalow with the girl and her dog, waiting outside. About 10 minutes later, the boyfriend came back and said the woman at reception told him it might be an animal, but there was a flashlight somewhere along the path. He said he was going to check it out, and we all decided to go together. I thought it was strange that Carla had stayed at reception because she normally loves this kind of thing. We walked for about 5 minutes until we reached a flashlight lying on the ground, turned on. When I looked at my friend Sophia's face, that's when I felt it. There were no sounds, no birds, no insects, nothing. Only the wind. I had a bad feeling and said we should go back, but the boyfriend kept insisting we go help whoever might be out there. When I got angry and said we were going back, he suddenly started laughing at us. That's when I noticed something disturbing. He had one single tooth in the front that was very yellow. The rest of his teeth were white. At that moment, the girl's dog started barking aggressively at him. He turned to us and said that going back wouldn't matter because he would always know where we were. Every hair on my body stood up. I knew something about this wasn't normal. I screamed at the girls to run. We all ran back to the bungalow. I didn't look back, but I felt like he was behind me. When we got close to the bungalow lights, I started shouting for him not to come any closer. He just stood near the forest, laughing. Suddenly, we saw 2 flashlights coming down the road. It was Carla and the girl's real boyfriend returning from reception, asking what was happening. I immediately shouted for them to come inside the bungalow. When I looked again, the thing was not there anymore, and we told them everything. Right away, Carla said, "You found a mimic." I'd never even heard that word in my life. None of us slept that night. We all stayed together in our bungalow. At 6 in the morning, since I hadn't slept at all, we went to reception and asked them to call the police. Later, the police showed us the security footage from the cameras. They said there was nobody there. But in the video, you could see me screaming at nothing and pointing to someone in front of the bungalow like I was a crazy person. After that, we decided to leave, and the couple, who had now become our friends, also decided to leave. While we were packing our things into the car, the police said they still wanted to talk to us later. We exchanged contact information with the couple. As we were leaving, the elderly couple from the 3rd bungalow came outside. They asked if we were leaving, and I said yes and asked if they had heard us screaming during the night. The woman said no, that they sleep very heavily. When I said goodbye to her, she smiled at me. And again, every hair on my body stood up, because she had the exact same smile and the same yellow tooth. I immediately turned away and told my friends in the car. They said that when we got home, we should call the detective. 2 weeks later, the detective called me. He told me that the third bungalow had never been used for guests. It was only used to store construction materials, so it was impossible for an elderly couple to have stayed there. To this day, the police never gave us the video footage we asked for so many times, the footage where we hoped to see the elderly couple. And I still live today without knowing what really happened. Thank you for reading my story. Thank you so much for submitting this story. This is so creepy, and I love how your friend Carla was like, yep, that's a mimic. Because I think that if anything, the elderly woman in the third bungalow was most certainly some sort of like witch or mimic who is able to shapeshift. And it's so crazy that she had the exact same smile as well. If you guys have any stories you'd like me to read, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can. And I will see you in the next one.
Welcome back to Spooky Reddit Reads with Michelle. This is episode 168 from a subreddit posted 1 month ago, and it is titled Mimicked Voices and Apparitions Appearing in My Parents' House, and now at my partner and I's flat. Long post. So let's get into it. So, I sincerely apologize in advance if this becomes a bit long, so I will try my best to keep it as short as I possibly can. No, don't. We want to hear those details. I am 26. For the longest time that I can remember, I've experienced some paranormal things happening to me, especially while still living with my parents. Such occurrences at my parents' house included while brushing my teeth, my toothpaste tube, which was nowhere near, started rocking on its own. This was only for a few seconds, but the windows were shut and nobody else was in the room with me. The rocking chair next to my bed started rocking, waking me up, and it did so for several seconds before I kindly asked it to stop. Fair enough. Money tins under my bed could be heard moving around at night sometimes, very unmistakable, as they were directly below my pillow and the only things metal directly under my bed. The voices started about a year ago. I had already moved in with my partner and had been living there for a couple of years. One day, my partner told me the day before that he was going back late from a job, so he was not going to be there when I came home from work. When I walked in as clear as a bell, I heard my partner say, "Hey," from the back bedroom. I was surprised, told him this as I thought he was going to be back a bit later that day. I quickly noticed that not only had he not responded to me, but the room in which the voice came from was in complete darkness, no lights, nor TV. And of course, when I went and checked, he was not in the room. I felt immediately uneasy and quickly took the dog outside. Now, my parents and 2 brothers who stay in the house still have all started hearing and seeing things in the house, and it has only gotten worse in the last few weeks. One of my brothers has said that he heard my other little brother angrily say, "You better not be doing what I think you're doing." My mom had heard my youngest call for her, but she knew it was not him and he was in his bed sleeping and it was late. She refused to turn around or even acknowledge it. However, she was left scared and now refuses to go into the living room alone late at night. My dad, who is very much a skeptic and he's skeptical of everything like that, has now heard someone speak to him. He didn't recognize the voice. Brothers who stay there currently still have all seen figures, one of which saw an old lady who we believe might have been my gran, who passed away just before this. Walked into my parents' room and stood there, and this apparition was staring at him. He has also seen the door to the room close on its own recently, and after going into the room thinking my mom had closed the door, he was shocked and scared to see that there was again an empty room and nothing but darkness. My partner, a bit like my dad, is very skeptical but has now started seeing things. Last night he saw someone sitting on the end of his bed staring at him. The figure was tall and had a silhouette and light reflected off its head. He thought it was me. We slept in different rooms due to me getting up early for work. He was a bit uneasy but shone a torch up on it for I'm so sorry. Some of the writing here is very hard to read. I don't believe that they're American, and it's like worded very odd. So he shined a flashlight on it and then it quickly disappeared. Sorry. We were also on a holiday a few weeks ago, and the entire time I felt uneasy and watched. My partner then told me when he got up to go close one of the doors, he saw a tall figure quickly walk across from one side of the room to the other. He told me the day after, as he was a bit frightened himself and did not want to scare me further, as I was already a little on edge. It feels a bit like the Insidious line, "It isn't the house that's haunted, it's your son." I am not saying that I am 100% the haunted person, but it started off with me, and it now seems to be spreading to other people in my family and partner. And I have been more vocal about what's going on, and I am not even sure I'm looking for advice and just sharing this experience. But I guess if anyone has advice on how to deal or what even this could be, that would be truly appreciated. I have read about mimics, but only a little, so not entirely sure if that is what is going on here. I always look for logical answers first, windows open, tiredness, etc. But too many things are happening, and family are starting to see and hear things and are making it seem more plausible that someone or something is really going on. They've edited to add some additional information. Additional info. I would like to add that while working on my old place, I would often be one to open the place before the other families or colleagues arrived, and on several occasions the sensor lights deep within the building would have already turned themselves on. It was almost as if somebody had been walking around before I arrived. This was not the case, as not only was the building locked each night, but the park was monitored 24/7. I would also hear 3 knocks on my office door upon opening it and would find no one there. A colleague heard this one day too, and even stopped his conversation with me to allow me to get the door in case it was family needing a taxi to get home. Further edit, my partner is now saying that the person who was likely visited him last night was his gran, who passed away 14 years to this day. I am not sure about it, but I guess we will never truly know. All right, so that one's kind of a mimic story potentially, but about a random activity, and it's an interesting one. I was not thinking, we've been watching Insidious, so it's funny that she quoted Insidious in here, but the whole idea that it's not the house that has the haunting, but the person, I think that might be a very valid thought here. I don't think that it's anything probably bad. It does clearly want to make its presence known. However, it seems like, if anything, this is probably a family haunting, and perhaps she's sensitive and spirits are just a little bit drawn to her because it's happening at work and it's happening other places where she lived as a child and where she moved, and then her whole family starts witnessing it slowly. So it's like you can't ignore it at that point, like blow it off anymore. So I do believe that she's probably got paranormal activity happening for her, and I do believe it's likely that this could be linked to family, whether it's his or hers. But I think that it's an interesting story, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Please drop your feedback in the comments. Leave me a comment, a heart, and a repost so that others can read my stories, hear my stories. I do the reading. All right, guys, have a wonderful day.
Let's read another true and scary story. This one is called How Was My Father in Two Places at Once? First off, a little backstory on my dad. The man has so much character and color to him. Though he is mostly a chilled out grandpa at this point, when I was a kid he was a crazy person. He was an amazing father, honest to a fault, and had character made of stone. He apologized when he felt he was wrong, and he would sit and cry with you when things were eating away at your self-esteem. However, as much as I owe him my morality and compassion towards others, I also owe him my extremely demented and nothing is sacred sense of humor. The man got more joy from life in tormenting his children than anything else. We lived on my grandmother's farm in rural Tennessee, and when the power would go out, which happened a lot in our area, he would dare me to run to the mailbox and then lock me outside, at 10 o'clock at night when I'm about 10 years old, and he would laugh so hard I could hear him over my screams while I banged on the door from the outside, pleading to be let back in. He was the type of dad to wake you up in the morning by revving a chainsaw, change the clocks in the house to make you get ready for school at 2 a.m., and stand on the front porch in his tidy whities while you were getting on the bus in the morning and yell, "I love you, I'm gonna miss you so bad," in a voice that could only imply that he was suffering from severe brain damage. In other words, he was always looking for a way to scare you, embarrass you, or just make you have such a crazy, unexpected experience that you'd be guaranteed to remember him forever. And it worked. I love that man. Now, that was needed for context, and this story takes place in my second to last year on my grandmother's farm. I was 17 and had been working a job in my small town stocking beer coolers and mopping floors at the local gas station. I was driving home from work in my little truck at about 10 p.m., and as I pulled into the driveway, my headlights shone up on the hill to my grandmother's house and panned down the hill to the edge of our single-wide mobile home. I stopped immediately. All 4 tires in the driveway, pointing straight to end of that straight stretch of gravel, I could see my dad. His old flatbed truck and my stepmother's minivan were parked pointing to the left at the base of our trailer. He was standing behind them, with his back to my headlights. Our chocolate lab, Cassie, sat at his feet, staring intently at him, paying no attention to the vehicle entering her territory, which was highly unlike her. I only stopped because it was so late and so unusual for my dad to be outside at this time. It was the middle of the week. He was usually passed out in his recliner wearing nothing but his underwear, with the History Channel quietly rambling on about the Civil War by this time. I slowly proceeded down the drive. Our driveway was about a half a football field in length, and as I drove slowly towards the bottom of the driveway, my dad began to walk, still with his back turned to me, and stepped behind the vehicles, the height of my stepmom's van fully concealing him. It took another 15 seconds from that point for me to reach the end of the driveway, and I pulled my truck in on the side of his flatbed, leaving me closest to the road. I grabbed my big gulp and got out of the truck. "Dad?" No response. "Dad?" Still nothing. Immediately, I got a bit creeped out, but then I thought to myself nearly as quick, this dude is trying to scare me again, and he must think I didn't see him. I got down on my knee and peered under the vehicles. His left boot, unmistakable. Cassie's back legs and butt right beside him, tail tucked between her legs. I hollered out, "You're doing a crappy job of hiding, Dad. I could see your boot sticking out from behind the tire of the van." I watched as his left boot slowly slid to the right until it was concealed behind the tire with the other. Still no response. I called for the dog. "Cassie!" She turned and literally scurried beneath the vehicles to get to me as if she was under heavy gunfire. She was whimpering when she got to me and acting very strange, as if she were terrified. She was acting how I would imagine a dog would act if they were constantly beat on, and I'd never seen her behave that way before. When she got to me, I placed my hand on her and you could almost hear her breathe a sigh of relief. She was sticking to my legs like glue, and I was still down on one knee and a bit off balance. She nearly knocked me over. I pet her for a moment and then tried to comfort her, but she seemed like she was afraid of something. With her tail still tucked between her legs, she pushed herself in between my legs as I stood up. It was after seeing how timid and odd Cassie was acting that I decided that I may be misreading the situation and that I might need to get into the house. My dad was surely a prankster, but when he was caught, he was caught. He never drug things out once we caught on. He would come out and say something like, "I guess you kids ain't as gullible as you used to be. I'm gonna have to start stepping it up a notch." Dad didn't drink much, and he never got drunk really, but I couldn't think of what the root of this odd behavior could possibly be, and it really started to weird me out. I walked around the front of my truck and around the vehicles to walk over to him. Cassie began to panic and whimper loudly, still glued to the inside of my ankles, crouched to the gravel with her head darting back and forth wildly. I stopped in front of my truck. I stand there for another moment in silence, waiting for something, but not sure what, and then announce, "Well, I'm heading in. See you in a bit, weirdo." I turned to walk to the front porch, unconsciously building speed as I hit the first step. Cassie drops back and doesn't follow me onto the porch, but seems to sort of stand guard at the foot of the steps. Keys in hand, I'm already searching for the deadbolt key. Panic is building in my chest, but I'm not sure why. I hurriedly unlock the door and jump into the house, swing around and slam the door behind me, locking the deadbolt all in one fluid motion. From behind me, I hear a voice yell, "What the hell?" I spin around. My big gulp drops to the floor and explodes across the living room floor. There sits my dad, in his underwear, sitting up from a deep sleep in his recliner. I began to hyperventilate and yell through gasps of air that there was a man in the driveway hiding behind the van. "I thought he was you. I was talking to him, Dad." I nearly collapsed into the floor. Within 15 seconds, my dad is running out the back door of the house with the spotlight and handgun, still wearing nothing but his underwear. He was outside for what felt like forever. When he came in, he was pale as a sheet. He said there was definitely someone out there, but he couldn't see them. He could hear them running, but when he pointed the spotlight in the direction of the footsteps, there was no one there. Crazy thing is, our trailer sat at the front of a 150-acre cornfield, and it was off-season, so everything was tilled down to the dirt. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. It was a terrifying experience, and I know it's one that seems easy to explain. My brain really wants to tell me that I had just foiled a car thief or something, or maybe even stopped a possible home invasion. The thing is though, my dad has an unmistakable posture and an even more unmistakable walk. I know those were his boots that I saw under the van. I also know that if he had somehow set all this up, I would have heard about it for years, because it would have been one of his favorite stories to tell, how he scared me so bad when I was 17 and how funny it would have been. He does tell people about this from time to time, but he always ends with the same detail. That it wasn't until he was outside running around in his underwear with a handgun that I realized that Cassie had been sleeping on the floor next to his recliner when I ran in the door. There is no way that a car thief has the exact same boots and posture as your dad, and there is a dog that the car thief has that is just like your lab, Cassie. That is actually insane. Insane. As always, if you guys have your own stories you'd like me to read, please message me, and I will see you in the next one. Let's read another true and scary story. This one is called The First Thing That Happened to Me on My Grandmother's Farm. I was about 11 when this happened. My older cousin Daniel, about 13, and I were playing hide and seek outside my grandmother's yard. She owned a large farm in Tennessee, just over 1,000 acres, and I grew up there my entire life, and so did Daniel, so it was nothing for us to wander off and play in areas that probably weren't very safe for the average kid, but we knew the property like the back of our hand. It just so happened that the day before this happened, a lot of trees were cut down to make room for a new mobile home by the roadside that she intended to rent out for extra income. Daniel and I naturally gravitated towards this new, unfamiliar landscape to play because it was something new to explore. All of the trees had been stripped of their branches and placed in logging trucks and hauled off. The branches, however, were all piled in a tangled mess about 50 feet wide and 12 to 15 feet tall. They were packed so densely that you couldn't see through them from one side to the other. It was during about the half-hour mark when it was my turn to find Daniel that I began to suspect that he was hiding in the woods deeper than our stated rules allowed. I remember calling his name for several minutes and hearing nothing but a quiet giggle coming from the woods. I was in the newly cut clearing looking into the woods and getting more upset by the minute. Finally, I announced as loudly as I could that if he wasn't going to play fairly, then I was going in to get a glass of tea and watch TV with Grandma. I started back up the hill and towards the house. It was at the moment I was walking past the brush pile, basically centered beside it, that I heard an unfamiliar voice. "You gave up quickly." I stopped. I called out, "Daniel?" It didn't sound like Daniel, but the voice responded, "Yes, I am Daniel. I am inside of the limbs." I looked at the brush pile and didn't see anyone. Again, I heard the odd voice call out, "If you do not see me, then you have not found me, and I will have won the game." I stepped closer and yelled out to the voice, "Why are you talking so funny?" The voice replied, "I am inside all of the limbs. Look inside and you will see me, Daniel." Something felt really strange about the way this guy was talking, but 11-year-old me just rationalized it, thinking maybe his voice sounds different behind the shrubbery and he sounds like he's talking funny because his voice sounds different. I stepped up to the edge of the brush pile and pulled the branches apart to look inside, and there was Daniel. His head was turned toward the top of the hill, but his body was facing me. I yelled out, "I caught you." His head shifted towards me and he had the single most disgusting smile I've ever seen to this very day. Imagine if someone has the absolute worst of intentions and they're trying to hide behind a fake innocent smile to gain your trust, but they can't help their glee with the thought they may have fooled you. That's the best way I can describe the smile. I was so shocked by this wicked facial expression on my cousin's face that I froze in place. The hairs on my neck and arms all raised, and I could suddenly feel my blood running through my body, like the temperature had dropped inside my veins. I stammered through my words. "How did you get in there?" He responded, "I fell into the inside of the limbs, cousin. I need you to give me help or I will continue to be trapped." I didn't notice this time how oddly he phrased his sentences, and it only occurred to me after that his lips were not moving when he spoke. He never changed his face from the twisted, unnerving smile. I didn't immediately notice any of these things because I was too distracted by the large stick that was plunged deeply into the side of his neck. I noticed in that moment that he had a slow, steady, trickling stream of blood flowing from the half-dollar size stick in his neck and down across his right shoulder and down his chest. That was enough to jolt my feet awake, and before my brain realized I was trying to run, I was already halfway up the hill to my grandmother's house. When I burst through the door to my grandmother's living room, Daniel was curled up in a ball on the couch and crying hysterically. My grandmother was sitting beside him, trying her best to get him to explain what was wrong, but all he would say is that there was a little boy in the woods who tagged him when he was hiding, and he thought it wasn't really me. He wouldn't say anything else. I was crying and shaken up by this point and told my grandmother what I had seen. She made us both some lunch and then called my uncle to come pick Daniel up. I stayed at my grandmother's house that night, and I bet she asked me what happened 100 times. She asked so many questions, it was if she were committing it to memory. I remember being so relieved that she believed me, but at the same time, I just wanted her to tell me that it was all in my imagination and help me forget about it. The next day, my grandmother set the brush pile on fire, and I watched for hours from the safety of the living room window as it slowly deteriorated into a pile of ash and ember. My cousin never did tell me what really happened to him that day. He refuses to talk about it. I will say this though, he wouldn't talk to me for a year and a half after that day. We were so close when we were little, but that event, whatever the hell it was, it drove a wedge between us that changed our relationship forever. That genuinely gave me full body chills. Every time I hear a story and it's like someone saw a physical entity instead of just hearing things, it always hits extra hard because I can't imagine what I would do if I were in that situation. As always, if you have any stories you'd like me to read, please send them my way. And if you're interested in more paranormal or spooky stories, be sure to follow me because that is all I post on my account, and I will see you in the next one.
Children are still creepy, but today's video is going to be even better than part 1 because we're reading from the Ask Reddit thread, Parents, what spooky past life memory did your kid utter? Welcome back to Creepy Crochet and Creepy Pasta, a series where I crochet something creepy and talk about something even creepier. Let's get into it. Was watching an old video of a jazz drummer playing a solo. No idea who it was, but he was really good. My daughter, probably age 3, was looking over my shoulder for a minute before she said, I used to play the drums like that when I was a man. Okay, I suppose that was a good warm-up. Let's see what else we got. I used to watch my nephew when he was about 3 or 4. One day he was at my house and pointed to a magnet of Arizona. It had a picture of the desert with rock formations. He had pointed at it and asked where it was. He said he used to live by red rocks like that with his first family who all had straight dark hair. His is blonde and curly, and that he had a mom and a dad, and he had had a brother until he went too far into the desert, too close to dark, and got eaten by not dogs, not wolves, but smaller. I said coyotes, and he kind of mouthed the word and said, coyotes, oh yeah, that's what you call them. Then he was sad and didn't want to talk about it anymore, so we had lunch, and that was the first and last time he mentioned it. I mean, I guess if y'all are that hungry. You didn't have any follow-up questions? Okay, to each their own, I guess. When my son was 4, we had driven past a cemetery. He asked me if I remembered when he and was buried. I said no and asked him what he meant by saying that. He said he had died, was buried in a cemetery, and that's when he started growing in my belly. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up when he said this. He doesn't remember saying this. When my nephew was about 3 or 4, my sister said he was throwing a tantrum in the car while he was in his car seat, and he yelled at her randomly, I waited 100 years to be born. Give little bro or man or just give him whatever he wants. Just give it, don't mess with him. When I was 3, I used to tell my mom stories about my other family every night before bed. The siblings I had and the dog too. One day she took me to Target and I told her I wanted big girl undies, and she said she would buy them for me and I could wear them when I was potty trained. I told her that my other family already potty trained me, so I can start wearing them now. I put them on that day and never had an accident after that. She never potty trained me and was just shocked. I mean, that's absurd, but guess convenient? I was driving my family across the state to visit family. Some commercial on the radio about Vegas came on, and I started singing Viva Las Vegas in my best Elvis impersonation. My son was about 3 to 4, and he says, I don't like Vegas. I lost my life and a lot of money there. His mom and I glanced at each other like, what the F? He never said anything else about it. What's with all these 3 to 4-year-olds saying weird shit? My son was 3 at the time. At bedtime, he said, Mama, one time the bad guys got me and drove me in their car. And I said, what? And he continued to tell me a story about being locked in a room and he was hungry and I didn't find him. The bad guys got away and he never got out. That shit scared me so much, I still get freaked by it. I held him so tight that night. Okay, yeah. We're done for today. Ta-da, little baby ghost face. Leave your comments of creepy shit your children or children you know have said in the comments. Maybe I'll read them for a future video. I'm not sure yet. Follow for more, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
I have another Mimmic story time. I got this one from Reddit, so we're gonna call the person from the story Chloe. So one night, Chloe was in the bathroom getting ready for bed. She was sitting there in front of the mirror doing all her nightly skincare routine. She had the door open since she was talking to her husband, who was sitting on their bed. She was having a full-on conversation with him and even looked over and saw him a few times. When out of nowhere, he just stopped responding. So she repeated herself, but this time he responded from the living room. Now, in order to get to the living room, you would have to walk right by the bathroom, and Chloe at no point in time saw her husband walking past her. So he walks into the bathroom and goes, "Were you talking to me?" Chloe says yes. Then her husband responds and goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I was in the living room." So Chloe asks how long had he been in the living room. Her husband responds with, "For a while now. I was actually waiting for you to finish with the bathroom so I could get ready for bed." He swears up and down that he never once walked into the bedroom and has no memory of the full-on conversation that Chloe was just having with him just a few moments ago. Till this day, Chloe and her husband have absolutely no idea who she had been speaking to that whole time and what was answering her. It gives them chills just to know that there was something just sitting on the bed answering back to her. Freaks them out till this day.
I think there's something living in the woods behind my house, and it knows exactly how my loved ones look like. Scary story time. It's been almost a year since this happened to me and my ex-best friend, and I still don't know how to explain it. At the time, my old house was surrounded by thick woods. To get back home, you had to walk down a long hill towards the house, and my dad had a small shop behind it. One night around 4 a.m., my friend and I were sneaking back home after sneaking out like teenagers do. We were almost to the house when suddenly she grabbed my arm and stopped walking. I looked at her thinking we'd been caught, then glanced towards my dad's shop. Standing there was what looked like my dad, except it wasn't. It wasn't a person. It was more like a dark shadow with his exact outline. I knew it wasn't really him, but I couldn't look away. It felt like I was frozen, watching this thing slowly fade into nothing. Neither of us could move. Then we heard footsteps coming toward us from the woods. Not rustling, not branches moving, but actual footsteps. We stood there for what felt like forever before survival instincts finally kicked in. I grabbed my friend's hand and we ran. At that point, I didn't care if my dad's security cameras caught us sneaking back in. We sprinted to the back door closest to my bedroom. My friend tripped up the stairs, exactly like people do in horror movies, dropped her frozen drink from the gas station, and scrambled back to her feet. We slammed the door, locked it, and rushed into my room. Once we finally caught our breath, I asked her, "What did you see?" And her answer made my stomach drop. She told me she hadn't been looking towards my dad's shop at all. She had been looking at the front porch, and she saw my sister standing there. We both started crying because we realized we'd each seen the same shadow-like figure, but it had appeared as different members of my family. That night, I was so terrified that I started looking up ways to spiritually protect a house. One suggestion was to pour a line of salt across your doorway. So I did. The following night, we were at her house and couldn't stop talking about what had happened. We wanted to make sure our memories matched, so without showing each other, we both drew what we'd seen. When we compared the drawings, they were almost identical. Even stranger, we'd both drawn a second picture showing the figure disappearing in the same exact way, almost like the next frame of an animation. We sat there trying to figure out why I saw my dad while she saw my sister. Then I jokingly said, "What if it was a mimic?" The second I said it, my phone suddenly started reading out loud what a mimic was. The problem was, I had never set up Siri. Neither of us had touched my phone. I moved away from that house about 7 months ago, but I still think about that night. Oddly enough, I never felt unsafe inside the house, only outside. And that's what makes me think something was out there, because months later, my ex-boyfriend had his own experience. One night, he was waiting outside while I was packing a bag inside the house. When I finally walked out, he looked completely shaken. He told me he had just watched me run past his truck. The only problem was, I had never left the house. He looked at me and said, "We need to get out of here." And to this day, I still wonder what we actually saw standing out there that night. And that's the end of the story. So if you had experienced this, would you call it a ghost or a mimic? I'm leaning towards mimic. OP did state that it took the shape of their brother and their father, so I'm leaning towards mimic. But have you ever experienced something like this? An entity in the woods or just out there in the dark taking shape or taking the persona or voice of someone you know? If you have any spooky stories that you'd love to share with me for me to read on here, you could send it to the email in my bio. Or you can leave your experiences in the comments. I'd love to read it. But yeah, let me know your thoughts.
Do you want to hear a creepy story? Let's talk about the Mimmic entity that was in this Reddit user's house. I'm not at all familiar with the supernatural, if this is indeed what we may be dealing with, which is the explanation that we're leaning towards. So this started when my boyfriend was over yesterday. He had picked me up from work and I went to shower. I was drying off when he opened the door and handed me my underwear. I told him that I appreciated the gesture, but I had underwear in the bathroom already. He also jokingly snapped at me with, "You freaking called me downstairs to bring you these. You better take them, woman." I assumed he was joking, so I just took the panties from him and told him to go back downstairs. Didn't think much of it. Next thing that happened was a couple of hours later. My roommate was getting ready to leave for a date with one of her friends when I heard her calling me from the bedroom to help zip her dress. I trotted over to her bedroom to find nobody there. Not only that, but when I saw her leaving the bathroom, she was wearing jeans and a tank top. Nothing that I had to zip. I told her that I heard her voice coming from the bedroom and she just looked confused. She went in and looked around. Her TV was off. Her computer was off. There was just nothing in the room. So the next bit came around 11 p.m. My boyfriend and I had been watching Netflix and I had a craving for ice cream, so we went to go get ice cream. After ice cream, we sat and watched an acoustic show for about an hour and a half before heading home. When we got home, we went into the bedroom and fell asleep watching TV. We woke up around 7 a.m. when he had to leave for work, and my roommate was already up and made the joke that we must have been really going at it the way you were shrieking last night. We did not have sex the night in question. I didn't know what she was talking about. When we were alone, we discussed what was happening. I was initially the one to draw the strange conclusion based on what was happening. The underwear thing, the dress thing, and the shrieking thing. She's a big believer in this kind of stuff, so she seemed open to that. The last bit of weirdness came when we were doing our evening meditation. We're both Wiccan, and we could hear speaking from the hallway. It was between two people. We broke concentration and listened. I'm not dumb, so I considered it was an intruder. And then clear as day through the door, we hear, "Night, y'all," and a high-pitched giggle. Both of those things are what my roommate does and says when she passes by my room and I'm with my boyfriend at night. We lit some sage through the house while saying a prayer. I'm not sure if that'll do any good. We also want to have the house tested for carbon monoxide and mold, and it's totally cool if you read into this and read this and don't buy into it, because I'm not 100% sure that I do either. And there's an edit, no carbon monoxide detected in the home. As of right now, we haven't experienced any other phenomenon that we've taken note of, but we are still very much on high alert. To be hearing something that sounds so like your friend or like someone you know and you trust, and then you find out it's not them. I have never had that experience, but the amount of fear and fight or flight that I would have, that is crazy. And I would love to hear if you have any Mimmic stories or other creepy phenomenon. Please send me any interesting stuff and let me know what you think about this story in the comments, because that is so scary and wild.
What if a mimic was trying to steal your baby? Well, I got an email of a family that is dealing with this right now, and it is terrifying. Guys, headphones, prayers, everything for this one. Before we get started, I just want to remind you to subscribe to my YT channel. The link is in my bio. My IG is also there too, where I post the same scary stories, different ones, and longer versions. If you want to send me your true scary story, my email is in my bio. Today's submitter's name is Ash, and Ash and her boyfriend in 2024 moved to Oklahoma to move in with a couple of friends. It's also important to note that Ash is pregnant during this time. We'll call these friends' names Nix and Jake. So one day, Ash is upstairs talking to Nix when she thinks that she sees her fiance in the corner. She looks over at her fiance, and her fiance is looking at her like he needs something. So she looks at him and she's like, and he doesn't say anything to her. He just stares at her and then he walks away. So she's like, okay, that's kind of weird. And she continues to talk to Nix. After she's done talking to Nix, a few minutes later, she walks downstairs to go see what her fiance wants. Her fiance's name is Asmudel. So she asks him, hey, what did you need? And he looks at her like she's crazy. He's like, what are you talking about? She's like, I just saw you upstairs. You just stared at me. And he was like, I wasn't upstairs. So this really freaks Ash out, but she doesn't really know what to do with it. So she kind of just brushes it off. A few days later, she's sitting right next to Asmodel, and she looks in the corner and she sees this figure standing in the doorway. Now this figure looks exactly like her fiance, and she's so confused. She's just staring at it as her fiance is sitting right next to her. So she's staring at this thing, it's staring back at her. She said that literally 2 or 3 minutes went by before she broke contact with this thing. She was so confused and in shock that she couldn't even move. And out of nowhere, this thing just vanishes. She doesn't really know what to do with this. She's like, should I say anything? Should I not? I am so confused right now. But she decides not to say anything because she's freaked out and she doesn't want to seem like she's crazy. This is just the beginning of the terror that happens to this family. A couple of months later, at the end of April, beginning of June, they move into their own house. One thing about this house is everybody knows that it's haunted. The reason being is because her fiance, Asmodel, used to live in this house. An example of something that happened to him when he was a kid, one time he was talking to his dad in the kitchen about his ceiling fan in his room. He goes back into his room, he lays in his bed. Something tells him to get up out of his bed immediately. So he jumps up, he gets out of his bed, and the minute he steps foot on the ground, the ceiling fan falls on the bed. So now they're living in this house, and one day in mid-June, her fiance had gotten a job where it kept him away from home for a little bit, and she was still pregnant during this time. So she's sitting on her couch when she hears footsteps, and she knows that he's at work, so she gets a little concerned, but she checks his location anyway. She looks down at her phone to check his location. She looks up, and when she looks up, she sees him standing in the front doorway. Next to him is a kid standing in the doorway of the bathroom. Now, Ash is absolutely terrified at this point. She cannot move. She is literally scared for her life. Ash said before this incident occurred, her baby would move around fine in her stomach. But after this incident occurred, she stopped moving around so much. And when she was born, the umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck twice. She almost was unalived. Now, you may think this is the end of it, and so did I, until I got a follow-up email from her, and she was terrified in the email. She said, something is going on my house. Please, I don't know what to do. I am so scared right now. Apparently, the other night, this was just a couple nights ago, she had gotten up to go to the bathroom. At this point, her daughter is born and she's in her bassinet in her room. She goes to the bathroom and she turns just to look at the bassinet in the room to check on her baby real quick, and she sees herself standing above the bassinet. Just herself, okay? Except for the only difference is this person is wide-eyed with red eyes, and she looked like she was trying to cry but like couldn't cry, like almost like trying to fake cry. That was the look on this woman's face. So obviously at this point she's like, this thing's trying to take my baby. So she starts walking towards it because she wants it to get away from her baby, and as soon as she does, she runs and grabs her baby. She pulls the baby out of the bassinet. This thing disappears and she's absolutely petrified. Sorry, both of my lights died. A couple days later, this is actually just a few days ago, her husband has this nightmare, and he has a nightmare of the shadow figure that she saw standing by the couch. In this nightmare, he's putting his baby upstairs. By the way, they do not have an upstairs. Afterwards, he comes back down, he sees his wife, they're now married, and he's like, I don't feel good. Something is wrong. I feel like something is wrong right now. I'm gonna go to the kitchen and I'm gonna grab a shiny object. So he comes out of the kitchen after grabbing that object and he goes towards his wife. And before he gets to her, he looks to his right and he sees this tall figure, like 8 feet tall. It's just this shadow figure. So he then stops to look at it. He said that it had no face and it was just growling at him. And then it just starts smiling. So while this is all happening in real life, his wife Ash is laying next to him and she sees him freaking out in his sleep. He's screaming in his sleep. So she tries to wake him up. She's like shaking him to wake him up. And then she looks at his eyes and she can see the whites of his eyes. So she just panics. So he finally wakes up and he's just panicked. He tells her about his dream and she's like, that's super weird. Then he falls back asleep, and then 30 minutes later, not even 30 minutes later, the baby wakes up crying, asking for her father. So a couple nights ago, this was like 2 days ago, literally, she was trying to fall asleep in her bed and she can't fall asleep when all of a sudden she feels something reach out from underneath the bed, tries to grab her but brushes against her hair. Then all of a sudden this stench came in the room and she said that it smelled like actual like terrible. Now, she wants to know what you guys think because she's absolutely terrified. She wants to know what she can possibly do. Does anyone have any suggestions for her? They don't know what to do and they feel like their life is in danger and they feel like something is trying to take their baby. And I personally think that this sounds like a mimic problem. What do you guys think? Do you think it's a mimic problem? You guys have now seen me in 5 different lightings. Sorry. So my name is Kaisa. I tell true scary stories that you guys submit to me on here every single night. If you have a true scary story, like I said, email's in my bio. email, kaisaspooky@gmail.com. Love every single one of you so much. I love it when you guys answer other people's questions in my comments. I love it when you guys are just sweet and kind. Honestly, you make my day every single day, and I truly, truly mean that. So I hope that you guys have a wonderful night, but I also need you to do me one more thing. And what is that? Have a spooky night. Love you guys. See you in the next one.
Spooky story time. A follower named Lily sent me this story, and we're going to call it Husband, Sister, or Mimic. Lily says that her husband works second shift. He leaves the house around 12:45 to catch the ferry and is usually home around 11:50 p.m. She says that while he's at work, she's at home with her 4 kids, just chilling most of the time. She says that one night around 8:30 p.m. she lays her babies down and she goes into her room, and she wants us to know that their rooms are directly across from each other. Around 9:30 p.m. she's in her room again, relaxing, scrolling on TikTok, and she hears, "Hey babe," coming from the living room. She says that the tone, the mood, the voice, everything that came from that statement sounded exactly like her husband. So she kind of rolls her eyes and she's like, ugh, what does he want? I just got comfortable. And as soon as she gets up, she realizes it's 9:30 p.m. Remember, her husband doesn't get home till about almost midnight. She checks his location, and sure enough, he's at work. She's stunned because she's like, I know what I heard. Moments later, she hears "babe," but like an aggravated voice, and she said the voice sounded very upset. So she walks to the hallway, and she's just staring at the hallway, expecting to see her husband maybe come out. Maybe he left work a little bit early, who knows? But again, it's impossible because his location is at work. She ended up falling asleep, and she ends up forgetting about this whole situation. One night, her sister comes over, and she leaves the house about 10:15 p.m., where she makes sure she locks the doors. She turns off all the lights. She walks into her bedroom. As soon as she crosses that doorway, she hears, "Lily, I forgot my bag. Can you please come help me find it?" This time, she's absolutely positive that she locked the doors, and there's no way that her sister got into the house without a key. Her sister does not have a key to her house. So that now is 2 instances. The last one that really freaked her out, and personally freaked me the hell out because I'm a mom, So one night, she is chilling. It's about 11 p.m. and she's waiting for her husband to get home from work. She's sitting in a big fluffy chair watching TV, and behind her is the hallway to the bedrooms. She's just chilling, and then she hears her oldest daughter literally yelling for her frantically to come to her room. Lily says that just 5 minutes ago, she had just checked on her kids to make sure that they were okay before she came to the living room to watch some TV. So she was like, being a mom, she jumps up, frightened and scared, like, oh my God, what's happening? My baby? Then she stops at the hallway, and she remembers the 2 prior incidents that happened. Everything just comes flooding back. She stops at that hallway. She kind of peeks in, and the room is closed, and everything is silent. She knows that you're not supposed to acknowledge them, but being a mom, she yelled back, "What is it, sweetie?" And she's just staring to see if she's gonna hear something back. Then she hears, "Just come here, Mom." She knew instantly that that was not her daughter, because her daughter never calls her mom. She always calls her mommy. She didn't move from that hallway until her husband got home, and she says that while she's waiting for her husband, she's scared as hell because she can hear that voice, "Mom, come here, I need your help," blah, 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 just constantly talking to her. Once her husband gets home, she goes and she checks on her kids, opens the door, and they are sound asleep. Lily says that she saged the whole house, and ever since then, she hasn't had any mimic, voices or anything like that, but she says that the house always feels heavy. She's constantly hearing footsteps, something touching her, and just constant knocking on walls and doors and stuff. Thank you so much to Lily for this story. If you guys have any other stories that you'd like for me to read, send them via DM or email, and I love to read them, and I will see you guys in the next spooky story. Bye!
This guy doesn't know what he saw. I think it might be a mimic. What do you think? This comes from the Unexplained subreddit, where OP initially starts off by saying he does not believe in much, but this has happened to him twice now, so he wants some answers. The first encounter starts when he was 9 and he was outside camping with his 2 brothers. Even though he's camping, OP was still playing on his DSi. Him and his brothers were playing one of those games, I don't know if you remember, but you could record yourself and it would have a little parrot repeat it back to you. And so they were playing with that, and the parrot repeated back to them, "Human want a cracker." They played with that for a bit until they got tired and they all wound down and went to go to bed, when, while everything was off, they heard from outside their tent a high-pitched voice go, Human want a cracker? All of them started screaming until their mom came out and got them, but there was nothing outside of their tent. Now flash forward to recently. OP's now 20 and he's in college. He's about 2 hours away from where he was camping in the first incident with his brothers. When he woke up around 4 a.m. to birds being super loud outside his window, but more than they were being loud, there was something odd. It sounded like the birds were saying heating and cooling, or at least there was something in the birds repeating back to them. Heating and cooling? OP wanted to assume he was dreaming, but it was too weird, so he got out of bed and went to check, and the second he looked outside, all of the birds stopped. There was no more noise. So he went and laid back down, and the second he laid back down, it started up again. A bird or something outside going, heating and cooling? OP really wasn't thinking much of it until he remembered his conversation that him and his girlfriend had been having before he went to bed that night, talking about the heating and cooling in their apartment.
Let's read another true and scary story from Reddit. Something outside my window kept calling my dog in my family's voice. I was 20 years old when this happened, in 2023. I live in a quiet suburb in Southern California. It was a rainy night, sometime around 9 p.m. My family had just finished dinner and everyone went to their rooms. My parents' room is toward the back of the house, facing the backyard, and my room faces the street. I have a large window right next to my bed, and that night I had it slightly open because I like the cool air when it rains. My 2 dogs were on the bed with me. I was sitting at my desk scrolling on Pinterest, trying to decide what I wanted to paint. That's when I heard it. Clear as day, I heard my mom's voice from outside my window say, "Bean, Bean." Bean is my dog's name. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I just assumed maybe my mom stepped outside for some reason. But then I paused. Our front door is old and heavy and loud. You can hear it open from anywhere in the house. I never heard it open. I froze and listened again. "Bean, Bean." It sounded exactly like her. Same tone, same cadence, not yelling, just casually calling him. My dog immediately reacted. He lifted his head and stared toward the window. His ears were perked up. He wasn't barking, just intensely focused. I felt this slow, sick feeling in my stomach. I called my mom. She answered from her room and said, "No, mija, I'm in here with your stepdad." I asked if she went outside. She said no. While I was still on the phone with her, I heard it again. "Bean, Beanie Weenie." That stopped my heart. Beanie Weenie was his nickname. And this time, it didn't sound exactly like my mom. It sounded like my sister. My mom and sister have similar voices, but slightly different tones. And somehow, whatever was outside sounded like both of them at different moments. My sister was at work that night. I checked her location. She was in the next town over. She didn't get off until 11. I slowly walked to my window and looked outside. There's a streetlight directly across from my house, so even though it was raining, the front yard was dimly lit. There was no one there. No car, no silhouette, no movement. Just rain hitting the pavement. Behind me, my dog was still staring at the window, and it kept repeating his name, over and over, calm, patient, like it was trying to get him to come outside. At that point, I was panicking. My stepdad went outside and jokingly yelled, "Who's out here scaring my daughter and calling my dog?" But there was no response. No footsteps, nothing running away, just rain. I shut and locked my window immediately. I ended up calling my boyfriend at the time because I was shaking so badly. Even he, and he scares easily, didn't know what to say. Nothing else happened that night, but I still think about the way it switched voices, and the way my dog knew it was there. But I remember the story so clearly, but now my poor Bean has gone to heaven recently because of old age. I always think about it, and it's always a good story to tell. This is so spooky and definitely an instance of some sort of flesh pedestrian or mimic, and I'd be curious to know why it was specifically trying to lure the dog outside. Like, that's really scary and really sad. Also, rest in peace to little Beanie Weenie. I'm glad he didn't go outside because I don't even want to know what this creature would have done. Anyways, if you guys have any spooky stories you'd like me to read, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can, and I will see you in the next one.
Creepy paranormal stories from Reddit users. Let's go. Me, 36 female, and my daughter Olivia, 16 female, live in a small town in South Dakota. She goes with her father every weekend. She leaves every Friday afternoon and comes back Sunday evenings, so usually she'll be gone by the time I get home from work on Friday evenings. This particular Friday, when I pulled up to our driveway, I looked up at her window and noticed her bedroom light was still on. I figured she'd accidentally left it on before leaving. I don't know. I walk into the house and hear movement coming from upstairs. "Oh, she's still home," I whispered to myself. I went upstairs and knocked on her bedroom door and slowly opened it. "Your dad isn't picking you up this weekend?" I asked. "No, I told him I want to stay," she said while looking down at her journal. "Great, I'll make dinner for us and we can watch a movie if you'd like." There was a long pause before she said, "Yes." I closed her door and I thought she was acting a bit standoffish. She usually has a lot to say. I texted her dad asking if they maybe got into some sort of disagreement or argument that led her to not wanting to go with him this weekend. I went downstairs and started making dinner for us. As the food was cooking, I started organizing things around the house, and I noticed Olivia's book bag and coat aren't hung where we usually hang our things when we get home. I thought maybe she took her things up to her room. No biggie. I went into the living room and saw Olivia sitting on the couch facing away from me. I didn't even hear her come down the stairs. She kind of startled me, especially because she's just sitting there, not on her phone like usual, and the TV was off. I walk over to the kitchen and check on the food. I yell out if she can please pick out a movie for us. I went out to check what movie she picked, and to my surprise, the TV is still off, and she's still sitting there, motionless. "Olivia, you didn't hear me?" I said. I grabbed the remote and pick out a movie. I chose The Conjuring. I love Vera Farmiga. I grabbed our plates, and as I sat down on the couch, I heard a notification coming from my phone in the kitchen. I told her I'll be right back. I checked my phone, and it was a text from her father. After reading his message, my body went cold and stiff. Literal chills. He said, "What do you mean? I picked Olivia up from school, and we're grabbing dinner with her grandma right now." I feel catatonic at this point. I took a deep breath and walked slowly towards the living room, peeking in to see if it was still sitting on the couch. It was. It was just sitting there very still, looking forward but away from me. I haven't even seen Olivia's face since I've been home. Like the thing has purposely been avoiding eye contact. I went back to the kitchen. I didn't know what to do. I'm fucking terrified. I had to go back out there. My keys are in the living room. I took a deep breath and got the courage to walk out confidently, like everything was normal. It was gone. I don't know why I yelled out, "Olivia?" My stupid, confused human instincts. I heard its voice coming from upstairs, sounding just like my Olivia. It said, "Mom, I'm upstairs. I need your help," in the most sinister voice. Hell no. I grabbed my keys and ran the fuck out of the house. I was shaking so much I couldn't even put the damn keys in the ignition. God, I wish I had a push start for this very moment. As I reversed out of my driveway, I looked up at the house, and it was at Olivia's window, waving at me, faceless. I couldn't even breathe. I never drove off so fast in my life. That story has stuck with me for a bit. I find it so incredibly creepy and interesting. My thoughts are this is a mimic, someone with, or an entity with not so great intentions that try to provide a false sense of security and safety for you by mimicking somebody else that you know and trust. So this one is wild. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.
Someone emailed me and said that something was mimicking their 1-year-old brother, and that wasn't the only thing either. This story is just a mixture of horror. The story is long and it's detailed, and the scariest parts are at the end. And I hate to do that to you guys. I never do that to you guys, but it's just how the story was sent to me. This happened in Saudi Arabia, and this girl did tell me I could use her name. Her name is Cha, and she will be tagged in the description. So it started in 2023 when she moved to Saudi Arabia for her dad's work. But they were looking at schools for her and her siblings. She was 16 years old. Her siblings were 3 and 13. So the compound that they found offered a house to stay in until the house that they were renting was redesigned. It took about 3 weeks, and they agreed to move into a house that was right at the side of the compound. Now, the house that they were moving into was really old and creepy, and it had some weird stains in the house, and it also had writing on the walls from the previous owners that were renting it. The moment that they walk in, they put their bags down, and her dad walks over to the radio, and he starts working on the radio signal. So this house is furnished, right? So her mom and her are sitting in the kitchen chairs while her dad is working on the radio signal. The moment that her dad opens up the radio, there's like this strange noise coming out of it. It almost sounded like two people talking at the same time. The only thing is both voices weren't coming from the radio. One was coming from the radio, but the other was directly in Cha's ear. So she's kind of looking around, like thinking that everyone else heard it too, but no one is showing any signs of concern except for her mother. Her mom then looks at her and just goes, "Just be quiet." So she was kind of like, okay. After that, things are okay. They unpack their bags. They're looking around. As she's looking around, she finds these paintings, and these paintings are very unsettling to her. She said that they had faces on them, but it was strange because it would just be like an ordinary picture of like a rose. There wasn't actual pictures of faces, but she could see faces in the pictures. Well, at this point, she decides that she's just going to ignore this because she's starting to get freaked out. She doesn't really understand the voice things, the paintings now, and the radio. Well, her and her mom decide that they're going to walk upstairs. So they walk upstairs, and when they get upstairs, they see this couch, and it's like this big pink couch. When suddenly her mom looks at her and is like, "Don't go anywhere near that couch." And she's like, "What?" And she's like, I don't want you to go anywhere near that couch. I'm getting a bad feeling from it. Just leave the couch alone. And she's just kind of like, okay. But right as her mom is saying this, she feels something staring at her from the corner of her eye, but she looks and there's nothing there. She again just thinks that she's being paranoid. So some time passes and it's now later on in the night, and she is trying to get settled in still. She's feeling very weird about the house. She's even feeling very unsettled about the room that she's in. But again, she decides to ignore it and she drifts off to sleep. She wakes up in the middle of the night and she cannot move a muscle. And there is someone breathing directly on her face. She said that it felt cold. She then opens up her eyes and she looks at the wall and she doesn't see anything, but she still cannot move and she's terrified. So she starts praying in her head, and then she starts trying to move her mouth. And as soon as she starts to try to move her mouth, her body is suddenly able to move. But she sits up and all of a sudden she cannot breathe. She said that this went on for nights. The same exact thing would happen. She would go to bed, she would wake up in the middle of the night, she would wake up to something breathing on her face, she would open her eyes, look at the wall, and then she would sit up as soon as she was out of sleep paralysis and she could not breathe. She said that at one time she even woke up to her luggage being in a different part of her room than she had left it. She said that the exact amount of time that this went on for was 5 nights. And during this time that this was happening to her, apparently her father was sleep talking a lot, and he was saying things like, please forgive me, don't, stop it, in the middle of the night. And her mom would wake up to this and wonder what the hell he was doing and just be sitting there as he was talking in his sleep, saying the strangest things. And he had never done this before. But 2 weeks later, things get weirder. So her and her siblings are in her house and they're just hanging out when suddenly they hear the door just slam shut. It just slams shut, and it's the door to their shared bathroom. They walk over to the door and the door is completely locked. They cannot open it, and they did not lock it, and they did not shut it. They cannot get this door open. They actually had to wait for their father to get home, and thank God nobody was in that bathroom because they would have been locked in the bathroom. So that freaks her out, and she knows at this point that something is going on. After the whole door debacle, she decides that she's going to go into her room. As soon as she walks into her room, she notices something on her curtains that she had not noticed previously. There's these weird brownish, reddish, she said kind of orangish stains on her curtains. She said they looked old and new. She immediately starts thinking blood, right? So she starts freaking out. She starts taking pictures and she runs downstairs and she shows her mom the picture. Her mom loses it over this. Her mom is like, someone was murdered here. I know it. Like, obviously her mom is having these weird feelings about the house. She was from the second she walked into the house. So she's freaking out about this. So she goes over to the father and she shows the father the pictures. And she's like, something happened here. And her father, apparently, who has been pretty dismissive this entire time, is being dismissive again. Her mom is adamant. She's like, no, go upstairs and check the curtains right now. So he walks up the stairs, he walks into her room, he goes and looks at the curtains, and she said that he just stopped and stared at them. Didn't say a word, just like stared at the curtains, but he says nothing, and then he just walks out of the room. Here's the crazy part. She goes outside, right? She goes outside and she looks at the backyard sometime later, and she sees this spot outside, and there's grass, green grass everywhere, except for this one big patch of dirt. Literally, she said it looks like a grave site. It looked like a grave site without a gravestone. It's the only part of the yard that does not have grass growing on it. So she's just like, okay, that is weird, and she has a theory. She thinks that somebody was in that house and that they were buried in the backyard. They're about to leave this house anyway because their house is now ready. And so she's thinking in her head, okay, I'm about to leave. This mess is gonna all be behind me. She could not have been more wrong. She would experience some of the scariest things that she had ever experienced in her entire life. So the house is ready to move in, and there's a maid that helped them move everything out and everything into the new house. So she's upstairs in her siblings' room and she's taking out the bed frame so that she can get to the bed covers. Apparently there was bed covers like below the bed frame. As soon as she goes to grab them, something shoves her. She said that her knee hit the hardwood floor and her jaw just smashed on the corner of the table. She said that this hurt so bad she was bruised for weeks. Fast forward, it gets so much worse. So the whole incident with her being pushed, later on that night, she goes to bed. She wakes up in the middle of the night and she realizes that she's paralyzed again. And she's like, what the fuck? What? Why? She opens her eyes, she looks to the right of her, and standing right in front of her face is a goat man and then a woman wearing pink. And they are talking to one another and she cannot understand a word they are saying. She is terrified at this point. When suddenly, after they're done talking at this point, the goat man takes his hoof, puts it on her neck and smashes down and starts twisting her neck. So at this point, she just starts praying in her head. But immediately when she started praying, this thing starts letting go, but it starts to get angry and she can visibly see this, and then it just disappears. Somehow she goes back to sleep. Of course she does. You guys are insane. Well, the night is not over for her because she wakes up a couple hours later and she can hear someone playing with her drawers. Her eyes are closed, but she can hear them like opening and closing her drawers. And at first she thinks that this is just her little brother because he would sometimes come in her her room and just play with stuff. So she, without opening her eyes, says, "Stop, Adam, what are you doing?" But no one responds. So she opens up her eyes and she doesn't see anyone. She's like, okay, that's weird. So she ends up drifting back off to sleep. As part of this, she wakes up again for the third time, paralyzed. She had left her door slightly open, so she opens up her eyes and she looks in the doorway and she sees this tall, slender figure wearing her baby brother's clothes when he was 1 year old, imitating her little brother's voice, calling out for her to come play with him. She said that this scared her so badly. It was one of the most terrifying things that she had ever gone through. She literally thought she was going crazy. She said the worst thing about this was that after this happened, for a long period of time, she would repeatedly catch her little brother, who was 3 years old, by the way, staring in the mirror, just talking to himself, laughing, acting like somebody was on the other side and he was playing with that thing or whatever it was, but he was staring at himself constantly, just laughing. He would do this in her room though. Like, he would go into her room and just stand in front of her mirror for hours at a time, just laughing and touching the mirror, just talking to himself. She did say that suddenly things did go back to normal and she's not sure why it stopped, but that it did eventually stop and that she's so glad because it was the scariest experience that she had ever had. I'm so sorry, you guys. The story was so long. I have no time for anything. Please leave your thoughts, suggestions, comments like down below. But as always, please be respectful. I would love to know what you think about this story. What do you think this was? And what do you think her little brother was doing? Love you so much. Keep sending me your scary stories and have a spooky night. Spooky kisses and haunted hugs.
I have an update for the insane Mimmic story that one of my followers sent me, and it is so terrifying. If you didn't see the first part, I'm going to give you a quick summary. My follower had been experiencing what seemed like a mimic in multiple homes, something that sounded like it was humming from her daughter's nursery, something that presented itself to her husband as her, like as my follower, but with long dark hair. And it was all happening in one apartment that they then moved out of, and in their new townhome, it started happening too. And where we left off in part 1 was that at the end of that email that I was sent by my follower, she said that she was really nervous about her husband being gone for 9 months with the military because she felt like whatever this was waiting for him to leave. The problem is that she sent me that email a year ago and I just found it like last week. So I reached out to her and asked her for an update, and what she gave me is crazy. A month into her husband leaving for 9 months, I mean, she is just feeling really nervous. She said the separation anxiety is kicking in hard. One night, she wakes up around midnight, and when she wakes up, she was so hot when she was sleeping, there was like a puddle of sweat beneath her, but the house is freezing. And she's like, whoa, this is like way colder than it usually is. Not weird for her to sweat during the night, but it is weird for the house to feel this freezing. And she gets up from bed to go adjust the thermostat. And as she's going downstairs, she ends up falling down like 4 stairs. The weird part is that she hears something giggling after this from her daughter's room. She thought maybe her daughter heard her falling down the stairs and was like giggling at her. So she pokes her head into her daughter's room. Her daughter's dead asleep. And something I mentioned in the last video is that her daughter's closet light kept turning on its own. And when her mom looks in that closet, the light is on. She ends up lighting a prayer candle for her daughter, and as she goes to check the thermostat, it says it's 72, and she's just really confused why it is so cold in her house. She really just doesn't know what to do, and so she reaches out to someone she describes as a lovely medicine woman who practices herbalism. Basically, she gives her the rundown of what's going on. I think that the person who sent me this email also sells like crystals and stuff, so I think they're like business acquaintances. But anyways, this woman says that she's going to do a candle reading for my follower. And when the candle reading comes back, basically the herbal medicine lady is like, somebody put evil eye on you. She ends up doing some things, including an egg cleanse, and eventually gets like 6 months of reprieve from whatever this thing is. It seems like this thing just comes and goes at random. Things have been chill for months. So one night, she's laying in bed, just scrolling on her phone through TikTok, and you know how it is when your eyes just start getting really heavy, and she's kind of falling asleep when suddenly it feels like her entire body just starts shaking. She has this cold chill run right down her back, and she feels like she needs to open her eyes again. And she's laying on her husband's side of the bed where she's been sleeping while he's been away, and as she turns over, she sees what looks like a woman in a long white dress with matted hair staring back at her. And it's like hovering in the air, staring at her, she says. And it had these like long talon claws. And she is completely terrified. It is dark in the room at this point. It's just like her and her cell phone. So she grabs her phone, turns on the flashlight. And of course, when she shines the light where she saw this woman, nothing's there. And she says this thing that almost seems like her protection mantra, which is, if you are not from the light, be gone from my sight. And it seems like this always gives her a little bit of peace. So she says it, and then she tries to go back to bed. Somehow she falls asleep, but of course, something wakes her up. This time, it's what sounds like somebody whispering. And so she opens her eyes, and on the side of the bed, crouching in front of her, is the woman in the long white dress with the matted hair. Except this time there were no distinguishable features. She was just a silhouette. And this woman whispers, "Now you see me." And the woman who sent me this email literally grabs her iPhone and chucks it at this lady. Of course, doesn't hit anything. The phone just goes flying to the other side of the room. She was terrified. Did not sleep in her bedroom again after that. Decided to sleep in the living room. In the month that followed, a lot of weird things did happen, but nothing to that extent. And then what's really strange is that she ends off the email by saying that when her husband got back, they ended up separating. But what's interesting is since then, since she separated from her husband, nothing has happened ever again. She said, "I think whatever it was attached to my husband, not me or my children, and it didn't like how strong of a presence I made in his life. But who knows?" No matter what, I'm really thankful for this update, and it's just really weird because her husband was the one who saw what looked like her with long black hair, and then she sees this thing with a long white dress and matted hair. Was it this thing that was attached to her husband, or so she thinks? I don't know. You guys are gonna have to let me know what you think about this one, but so happy to finally have an end to this story. Stay spooky, friends.
I had an SW pretending to be my mom and my dog within the span of 5 minutes. I can't believe I didn't notice there was lipstick sitting on my tooth, because now it's all I can look at for the rest of the video, but enjoy the story anyway. For those of you who are new, I'm Jasmine. My family has been haunted for as long as I can remember, and these are my stories. Just a little bit of background. I'm from California, born and raised. My husband is from Louisiana. Last year we moved to Louisiana and we stayed out there for a year just to visit with his family. And when we came back to visit Cali, we just decided to move back on a whim. So because we didn't really have somewhere to stay, we decided to stay with my mom and get our credit up so we can just get a house. Being back in my childhood home has definitely brought back hauntings once again. Not that they ever really fully went away, but I feel like they weren't necessarily attached to me as much as they were to my mom or my sister. So being back in this house, we're experiencing paranormal activity again. When we first moved back, my husband was working a job that required him to be there at 4 a.m. So we would have to wake up at 3 in the morning in order to get him to work on time. Now this is already a problem because 3 a.m. is the witching hour. After we woke up, my husband went in the bathroom and started getting ready, and my dog came up to me. He's 13 years old and definitely on his last leg, and was asking me to go outside. So I go and open the door for him, and I shut the door behind him, and I'm standing there waiting for him to come back in. I stood there with intention to let him back in when he was done, because he likes to scratch at the glass when he's done going to the bathroom, and he barks really loud. So I was waiting on him, and my husband walks around the corner and he's like, "Oh my god, why is Twitter being so annoying?" Now, don't get on me about my dog's name. I named him when I was 11, and it actually wasn't even my idea to name him that, but anyway. So I was like, "What are you talking about? Twitter is outside. I literally just put him outside and I'm standing here waiting for him to come back in." And he's like, "No, he's not. He's scratching at the bathroom door and whimpering." And I was like, "No, he can't possibly be doing that. I'm waiting for him to come back inside." Why does Twitter walk around the corner from the hallway where the bathroom is, and I start hyperventilating and crying? And my husband's like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I'm like, "That's not Twitter. That's not Twitter. That's not Twitter. That's not Twitter." And I'm just crying, freaked out. You can tell something has shook me to my core, because I knew that every intention in me had been standing at that door to wait on my dog to come back in. So I knew that was not my dog. I go outside and start looking around, and he is nowhere to be found. So either I let the SW outside, or the SW was the one that was in the house. But either way, the SW was present. As I'm starting to freak out and cry, I hear "Jasmine" coming from my mom's room. And I was like, okay. My husband heard it too. It definitely sounded like my mom's voice, but it was creepy. It came in a very ominous, sing-songy, "Hey, come here" type of voice, you know? So I go to the back, mad, ready, and my mom is knocked the fuck out. And I wake her up and I'm like, "Why are you calling me? What do you want?" And she's like,
I didn't call you. I'm obviously asleep. Now, hear me out. My mom has obviously been through these hauntings with me and the rest of my family as well, so she's just not the kind of person that would fuck with me like that. And she wouldn't wake up at 3 a.m. just to fuck with me. And I heard my name being called, and my husband also heard it clear as day. So we knew that something was mimicking my mom, trying to draw me into her room. Now, mind you, my mom's room is probably the most haunted avenue through the entire house. Like, this is the hub for wherever these entities like to be. So I let this go, and I'm like, all right, well, can't do anything about it anyway. So I go take him to work, everything's cool, whatever, we move on. So then the next day, my husband and I once again hear my name at 3 a.m. Jasmine, coming from the back. And I'm like, dude, do I even go check this time? And he tells me, like, just fuck it, go check. So I go back there once again. Mom, what do you want? I'm not calling you. I have not said your name. I am clearly asleep. All right, word. So this thing is mimicking my mom's voice, trying to get me to come back there. And I don't know what it was planning on doing, but it just kept trying to draw me into that room. About a week later, the SW comes back and decides to test my husband this time. So my husband's sitting in the living room and he has Twitter out there with him. So they are just sitting out there together watching TV. My husband gets up to go to the bathroom, and right in front of my mom's door, he sees Twitter. But he knows that's not Twitter, because he was just in the living room with Twitter, and Twitter did not get up and follow him to the bathroom. Now, the other creepiest part of this is that right in front of my mom's door, there is this darkness in the hallway that's darker than the rest of the hallway. It is so clear that right in front of this door is like something that lives there or sits there, because it is just so much darker than the rest of the hallway. So he comes to me freaking out saying, okay, not that I didn't ever believe you because you know that I'm all in the spiritual stuff. I know that you're never lying about this stuff, but I just saw the SW myself, and yep, we need to get the fuck. So yeah, that one is not as scary as the rest of my stories, but it was the most recent, and it was the first time I encountered a mimic. I have definitely encountered an SW being like pretending to be my dog before, but I had never had it mimic my mother or anyone I knew. So this was the first time that the mimic was also included in the story. I don't know if SWs do mimic, or if SWs and mimics are two different things and they were working together. If you know, comment down below. But all I know was that an SW was present, and it was definitely a mimic. Or if the mimic can shapeshift, then there you go. But yeah, follow me for more stories, and go ahead and watch the rest of the stories on this playlist. I have far more interesting ones than this, but this was just one of the most recent that happened. Anyways, love y'all. Peace out.
Imagine your husband walking in from work, sitting at the kitchen table, and then your phone rings and it's your husband ringing you. I was in the kitchen making pasta for dinner, and all of a sudden I've heard my husband come through the door, and I shouted hello and he didn't respond. And this seemed really off to me, because no matter how tired he was, how exhausted he was, he would always respond to me. I shouted hello again and I didn't hear anything, so I shouted, is everything okay? At which point my husband replied saying yes. As he said yes, I've noticed he's standing in the doorway of the kitchen, just standing there watching me. Same face, same body, same shirt, same trousers, everything the same as my husband, but just something seemed off. I then asked him, is everything okay? And he has replied saying, did anybody call today? I've laughed it off and kind of said to him, like, was you expecting a phone call today? No one's, what do you mean? He's then repeated the question, same tone, same rhythm, everything, and obviously I've replied saying, no. He's then locked eyes with me and calmly asked me, did you lock the back door? I looked at him and asked him what he meant, and he just repeated the question again. All of a sudden my phone started ringing and it was in my pocket, so I've got my phone at my pocket and it was my husband. I've answered the phone, unable to move, completely still, and all he said is, hi babe, leaving now, I'll be back in 20. When I tell you my whole blood ran cold, I felt like I couldn't move, I felt sick. I didn't know what to do, because if my husband was on the phone, then who was sitting in my kitchen? I've then looked up to my husband, who was sitting on the kitchen table, and he slowly stood up, smiling at me. He did not break eye contact with me. He was standing there, literally grinning at me. I couldn't even speak. I was just absolutely frozen. At the same time, my husband's on the phone, shouting my name, saying, hello, hello, what's the matter? Is anyone there? As he's doing this thing that was sitting at my kitchen counter has stood up and started walking towards the stairs. I've managed to mumble out the words to my husband, someone's in the house and it looks like you. I don't know what to do. My husband's laughed and then realised the severity of my voice and told me to get out. And I've seen this figure walk up towards the stairs. As soon as this thing has gone up the stairs, I've absolutely bolted out of the house, and my husband came back from work and I was over at a neighbour's house. My husband's gone in the house, he's checked everything, there was nothing there. Nothing at all. He's then started asking me if I've imagined it or if it was an accident or anything like that, or I didn't notice what was happening. But then I remembered something. When this thing was walking up to the stairs, it passed a mirror, and I noticed the reflection in the mirror. It was my husband's body, but it wasn't his face anymore. My husband then told me there was no one in the house and there's no explanation for it. He then calmly looked at me and said, "Did you lock the back door?" At this point, a big grin has came across his face, and at that very second, I heard my front door open again, and it was my husband. I think my husband. He was home. Good luck sleeping tonight.
I heard this story about a house that was completely infested with mimics. Now, it all started off with this family who lived in New York, and they had lived in this big home in a rural area. They, really, for the longest time, didn't have anything weird ever happen. Until one night, the wife and husband are, in the living room, and their kids are gone with a family friend. Well, the husband says, "I'm going to, leave and I'll be back. I'm going to go to the store. Do you need anything?" And his wife says, "No, I'm good. I'll see you when you get back." So her husband goes out the front door, gets in his car, and drives off. Right after he pulls out of the driveway, all of a sudden she hears a noise upstairs. And when she walks upstairs, she sees her husband come out of the closet and just start walking down the hallway. And she's like, "Honey, wait, how'd you get upstairs? You came back home?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm going back to the car. I'll talk to you later." And so he just goes downstairs and goes out the front door. So she calls her husband on the cell phone and was like, "Why'd you come back to the house? That was kind of weird. What were you doing upstairs?" And he goes, "What are you talking about? I'm far from home. I've been driving for a little while now." And she's confused, and she thinks he's just playing a prank on her. So fast forward to the wife and their two kids are sitting on the couch, and the wife and one of the kids are sitting on the couch, and one of the daughters comes downstairs and they say, "Hey, what are you doing? You want to come watch a movie with us?" And the daughter doesn't say anything. And they're like, "Hey, aren't you going to respond? What's wrong?" And the daughter still doesn't say anything. She just keeps walking past them, and she goes into another room. So the sister follows, and it's says their name and is like, "What are you doing?" Well, all of a sudden, the sister comes back down the stairs again, because she said, "I heard you guys calling my name." And they're like, "Wait, no, you just walked past us into that room. How'd you get upstairs?" And she's like, "What are you talking about? I've been upstairs in the bathroom." And once again, they didn't know how, the wife didn't know what to think of this. So finally, the last straw was one night, her husband and her two kids, they had left to go do something, and she's up in her bedroom. She hears some rustling sound in her closet, and she's like, what is there something in my closet? She opens the door, and there's her husband crouched down, holding his knees, sitting in the closet, kind of looking really weird, has this strange look on her face. And she's like, what are you doing in the closet? I thought you were with our daughters." And the man her husband just says, "Come in the closet with me." And she's like, "What?" And he's like, "Come in here, come in the closet." And she instantly knew that wasn't her husband, and she ran out the door and calls up her husband and is like, "Get here right now." And shortly after that, they end up moving.